Hey everyone, hope you're all doing great. Welcome back to the Anime Fictions 2.0. Today, we're diving into part 4 of What If Naruto created over 1,000 shadow clones and cheated the Ninja Academy? If you're enjoying these alternate timelines, make sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with your friends, and check out the other videos on the channel. And of course, drop your thoughts in the comments. I always love hearing your ideas. Alright, enough talk, let's get into the story. Prank Day 110, last stage of the Chunin exam. Muramaru, much like his creator, fell to his knees as soon as the fighting was done. He hadn't been using relentlessly like the real Naruto, but it was still the first time he fought for real using the sharp fist. He still had a twinge in his arm from redirecting Orochimaru's sword, and he knew he'd need a good few hours of chakra draining to be back to full efficiency as soon as he was alone. He sat there, panting for a good few minutes when an ANBU member appeared close to him on the rooftop. Said ninja looked around until his eyes fell on the clone. "You are Muramaru, correct?" the ANBU member asked. Muramaru simply nodded. "You are required urgently at the hospital," the ANBU said. He then reached with a single hand and grabbed the copy by the shoulder. What Muramaru started, only to find himself instantly transported to an empty room inside Konoha General Hospital. The ANBU did not let go, dragging him through corridors and stairwells. The clone had no idea where they were going. Clones did not get sick or hurt, and Naruto hadn't been sent there the few times he'd gotten seriously wounded. And he couldn't see why he would be needed here. The ANBU finally stopped beside an open door, releasing him. "Please go inside, Muramaru-san." He might have been mistaken, but he thought for an instant that he could detect a note of sadness in the ANBU's voice. He went in. There were 3 different medics around a single bed, and he could see 2 pairs of glowing hands on the chest of the person resting there. There wasn't much skin that could be seen on the patient, so Muramaru had no idea who he was. "He's here," one of the medics said. There was a slight movement. "Muramaru, come here," a wheezy voice rasped, clearly coming from the wounded ninja. It took a moment for Muramaru to recognize it. "As sensei?" One of the medics moved, and the Naruto clone saw the face of his master. Only a single eye was open, the other covered with burns and the like. Only a few tufts of Kuratori's white hair could be seen poking out from between the bandages, and even those looked sickly. Muramaru stepped forward, beside the bed. "You're gonna be okay, right?" Kuratori's single eye lowered, crushing the clone's hopes. "I am sorry," the Chunin said. "I will not. This wasn't something I wanted to teach you, but fate had other plans." A single tear made its way down Muramaru's face. You should save your strength, sensei." Muramaru-san, one of the medical ninjas, interjected, indicating his hands with a movement of his head. "Keeping him alive is the only thing we can do, and even that is only temporary. I am sorry, but he will not make it to tomorrow." "But," the clone replied. Kuratori said, and all eyes turned to him. "I have outlasted everyone I was close to. Friends, comrades, teachers, family. I do not fear death. There is only one last thing I need, and I need it from you." "Anything," Muramaru replied, voice full of tears. "I heard about you, defending the Hokage with the sharp fist." Kuratori's lips twitched, and the hint of a smile appeared. "I am glad that my choice was well made, and I am proud of you, student. I just need to be sure the sharp fist will be in good hands. It is earlier than usual, but this is my last request." "I need you to make the oath," the Chunin intoned. Muramaru gulped. He'd known about the oath, and even had made plans for it. He and Naruto had planned on clearing Kuratori on the prank before getting to that step, as all the clones agreed that such a pledge couldn't be made to someone who didn't know everything. But this was a scenario they'd never considered. Muramaru had no real way of contacting Naruto, and no time to do so anyway. And he couldn't let his teacher's last request go unanswered. "I swear," Muramaru started, tears now flowing quickly. "On family, fame, and the will of fire, that the sharp fist shall not die with me, and that it shall remain in the family for the generations that follow." Muramaru was glad to note that, at least, his voice was clear. "No clan shall claim it, and only the oath-bound shall practice it, that as long as I live." Kuratori gave a small smile once more, then relaxed. Good, he said softly. "I leave it in your hands." His breathing slowed, then stopped. A moment later, his heart followed suit. On October 22nd, 13 years and 12 days after the Kyuubi's attack, the last full-blooded member of the Hyjin family died of wounds received in battle after defending his village from invaders. He left behind only a single student. As soon the fighting tapered off, Ariko abandoned her spot on the apartment block's roof and ran straight for the shelters. She'd felt somewhat guilty for leaving them behind, so now that combat was done she was going back to them. The first two shelters were dead ends, one of them having even been evacuated due to explosives. The third, however, went differently. Ariko-chan! Mihoshi yelled as soon as she found her way inside, and the clone barely had time to use the chakra shield before being hugged to near bursting. We thought the worst. Are you alright? Where were you? What happened? I'm fine, Ariko replied, feeling guilty once more as the rest of the group joined in the hug. Asano even put an arm on Ariko's head to include a chibo into it. Everything's alright. Even with that, it was a good minute before the girls let her go. So, what happened? Fumichi, ever the leader, asked. I took a wrong turn, I think. That was the best explanation she'd found. I was watching the sky for enemies, and when I focused back on what was around me, all of you were gone. I tried checking around, but there were foreign ninja everywhere and I couldn't find you. What did you do? Hide? There was a note of doubt in Nishi's voice. The girls knew Ariko well, she wasn't the type to hide. The clone shook her head. No. I climbed the highest roof I could find and watched everything from there. I thought it best if I could see enemies coming before they got to me. Fumichi smirked. That's not all you did, was it? Well, I started, looking down somewhat. I kinda had a good view of the street outside the arena and a whole bunch of kunai, so I sniped whatever enemies I could see from there. That's more like you, Mihoshi said with a smile, and everyone nodded. Get anyone? A couple more than a couple, actually. She couldn't be sure of the exact number, but she'd taken down at least 10 from her count. An ANBU gave me enough explosive tags to do a fair amount of damage, actually. Ringo sighed while the rest had a little laugh. What is it with you and explosions? The planner of the group exclaimed. The class on explosive tags had been just a few days before the tournament, and the whole group were of the opinion that it was scary how casually she treated explosives. Ariko smiled as the moment passed. It seemed like they wouldn't hold what she'd done against her. So, what's happening outside? How's the battle going? Fumichi asked. A few other civilians and ninja around the group turned in our direction, clearly curious. Combat's nearly all done, the clone answered. Everyone's just sweeping for stragglers. She smiled, and raised a fist in the air. It's a Leaf victory, all the way. Cheers erupted all around, and she was smothered in another hug. This time, however, Mihoshi didn't join. What about losses? Mihoshi asked, a sad frown forming on her face. Did you see what happened to Mom? Ariko hadn't. Even with Ichibo's help, she hadn't been able to pick out the woman from her position. It didn't mean anything, she might have simply missed her. Mitoto might have been fighting inside the corridors or she might have been sent somewhere else. Still. Ariko reached out and hugged her fellow student. Don't worry. I'm sure she'll be fine. The rest of the group joined in. Mihoshi lowered her head. I just. Have nothing to fear, Mitoto's voice rang behind them. The group turned as one to see their comrade's mother standing in the door to the shelter. Miss me? She said with a smile. MOM. Mihoshi yelled, jumping into her mother's arms. Ariko gave a smile at the sight. She might not really know what family was about, but that didn't mean she couldn't be happy that others still had theirs. As Miramara left, Naruto also rose. There were probably still things to be done, and places he could help. The first thing he tried was going to the Hokage for orders, only to be stopped by the ANBU surrounding him. I am sorry, Uzumaki-san, the same female ANBU who'd intercepted him earlier spoke. But the Hokage is unavailable at this time. But he's right there? Naruto replied. See for yourself, the ANBU answered, moving slightly to the side. Naruto had barely made a single step forward when he noticed what she meant. Sarutobi was surrounded by people. Medics, couriers, guards, even someone he was pretty sure was Shikamaru's father. There were maps out and documents all over. I see, Naruto replied. It was clear Gigi had more important things to deal with right now. He was okay, that was what counted. He then turned toward the ANBU and bowed. Thank you for preventing me from making a mistake. Please inform him that I would like an audience with him once he has free time. Whoever she was, she'd been fair and polite, and deserved the same in return. I will be sure to pass the message, she replied with a small bow, then fell silent and stoic as ANBU generally were. His second choice was going down to the Urohara basement. He'd seen the clown-faced ANBU and had guessed at their origin, which meant that the clones below Konoha would have a good idea as to what was happening. His guess was confirmed in the tunnels, where many false ANBU were found. They were also all going in the same direction as him, which meant that they were clearly done above. Once in the basement proper, he quickly noted a group of clones standing separate from the rest, with maps and equipment at the ready. He went in that direction. So, what's the news? He asked as soon as he was close enough. Any place giving people trouble? The clone who looked like he was in charge approached. You're the original, right? Naruto nodded. With how many clones he made and spread, he couldn't blame them for losing track. Everything's pretty much done. Sand surrendered, what's left of Sound either escaped or is trying to, and the situation in the village is under control. A few fires here and there, along with enemy ninjas in hiding, but nothing that requires our help. What are the losses? The real Naruto asked. Within the clones? Naruto nodded once more. We're actually down around 20% from yesterday, I think. Only that? Uchiha shook his head. I had everyone generate the maximum number of clones before they went to fight. If we count an average of 4 new clones for each bunshin, that means we lost more than 2,000 clones today. And that's not counting those you made. Naruto grimaced. That was a lot more than he'd expected. Any important losses? The basement leader scowled. 3 council members. 2 of those in charge of the merchant network, and the one who found this place. Worse, the last doesn't even have a descendant still alive. The academy student nodded sadly. I'll have to find a worthy replacement for him. He then looked around and noted that most clones were abandoning their transformation. Anything else I need to take care of? Yeah, Uchiha replied. There's this. He pointed toward the ceiling. Naruto followed the clone's finger to find a group of clones, still in their disguises, holding someone down while they were glued on the ceiling. It was Gaara. Eh? What? Naruto exclaimed. Why? He asked, his hand waving in Gaara's direction. You saw what he did in the tournament, right? Uchiha asked. Of course. Well, the first batch of clones we sent out as reinforcements were to either take down Gaara or keep him busy, the bunshin explained. They managed the first by hosing him repeatedly with our sueton. We were planning to put him into a pool to keep him from getting his sand back, but it turns out that he can still control wet sand, even while unconscious. He pointed back up. That up there is the best solution we came up with. Gaara's conscious but blinded, and we're making sure his sand can't protect him by blowing it back with water regularly. And he knows he'd be dropping dozens of meters straight down into a pool if he does anything to the clones there. Okay, that was a novel method to keep someone prisoner, but he couldn't argue about the effectiveness. What should I do about this? I don't know. Uchiha shrugged. By the time the dispatched clones got Gaara out of his sand, he was basically choking on the ground. They didn't feel like finishing him on the spot. We still aren't sure if he did whatever happened on purpose. His sand reacts automatically, so he might simply have lost control. He was silent for a moment. You're the boss, so it's your decision, in the end. Naruto didn't like the idea of killing him. His clones had killed enough defenseless people during Gato's assassination, and he didn't like it one bit. He could live with killing in battle, but not a prisoner under control like that. And there had been more than enough blood spilled today. I'll have to talk to him first, Naruto finally decided. See what kind of person he is. I'm not gonna decide someone's fate without that. Uchiha nodded in agreement. Go right up, he replied, pointing at the wall. That's what Naruto did. He walked straight up, and was surprised to see a good bunch of other bunshin following him, either as bodyguards or out of curiosity. With how big the room was, it took a good 5 minutes of fighting gravity before he reached the sand genin. As soon as he was within meters of Gaara, the genin's head turned in Naruto's direction. I can feel you, he choked out. You are more powerful than anyone else around here. You are here to kill me, aren't you? His voice was full of conviction. Not if I can help it. That clearly wasn't the answer Gaara expected. Why? He yelled. Why would you not kill me? Your existence, why would you not prove it? Prove my existence? That made no sense to Naruto. How would killing prove my existence? Isn't that how the strong prove their strength? Their right to live? Gaara asked. By taking another's existence as your own? Naruto grimaced. That makes even less sense. You would kill and kill just to prove that you are alive? He was starting to think he might have to kill Gaara. He wouldn't like it, but he wasn't going to leave a killer on the loose. Yes, Gaara answered instantly. Isn't that how the ninja world works? A detail came to Naruto's mind. What happens when you've killed everyone? He asked. Gaara opened his mouth to reply, then closed it. If you kill everybody who ever knew you, nobody will remember you, Naruto continued. It will be as if you had never existed as a person. A plague or a natural disaster could do the same thing. You would no longer be human, just a thing. There was a minute of silence as Gaara clearly digested those words. Why? He finally asked, voice low. Why does everyone try to kill me then? Naruto didn't like the sound of that. It made him think a little too much about his situation, especially before the academy. Who tried to kill you? My father, Gaara replied, sounding somewhat broken. My uncle, Sunamaru, Furiko, Tokaz, Kotaro. He started, and didn't stop. Name after name came from his lips, and for a good 3 minutes he enumerated everyone who'd tried assassinating him. Lee was the last, and while Naruto disagreed with Gaara on that, he couldn't deny that the taijutsu specialist had gone at full power against the Sand Genin. Still, it hurt to think about that many assassination attempts. Part of it, though, might be because he was standing upside down on the ceiling. You're not gonna try killing me again? Naruto asked. It is useless, he answered, voice low. You would defeat me once more. Naruto smiled slightly. Let's get you down then. It'll be more comfortable to talk. Once down, Naruto got the whole story. How Gaara had been host to a demon before he was even born, how he'd been seen as a failure at controlling the Uchiha, and how that had led to the numerous murder attempts. His sand protected him from each one, killing his foes in gruesome ways. But still they came, until his father the Kazekage decided to use his violent tendencies instead. It disgusted Naruto. At first he'd been tense, ready to switch with the clone at a moment's notice, but as the story continued his disgust overwhelmed his readiness. Especially since he could imagine it so easily. He'd known of a few attempts on his own life, and with how much the ANBU were watching him, that was probably only a drop in the bucket. If Iruka and Gigi had been like Gaara's family, he probably would have turned out the same way, and that is assuming he'd have even survived. Naruto rose from his seating position and put his hand on Gaara's shoulder. The Genin's sand armor had regenerated, but he still made the gesture. I'll remember you, Gaara. As long as I live, I'll never let people forget you. Nobody will deny your existence while I'm around. I'll remember who you were and what you did, your trials and your battles. I promise. Gaara looked at Naruto like he was a square peg in a round hole. Why? He finally asked. Naruto looked his fellow container in the eye. Because, at the worst moment of my life, I was only 2 people away from being like you. If Iruka and Gigi hadn't been there, I might have gone down the same path as you. And now, I have more people behind me, with even more to come. One day, I'll be the Hokage, and I'll protect everyone. And no one will be able to pretend I don't exist. You could have gone the same way as me? Gaara asked. It looked like he couldn't make sense of that. As an answer, Naruto raised the hem of his shirt, channeling chakra to make the seal there visible. Kyubi, he replied simply. Normally, he wouldn't have told anyone, but if there was one person who could understand this burden, it was Gaara. The Sand Genin crumbled on himself. I never had any chance, didn't I? Not for the reason you're thinking of, Naruto replied seriously. I had others I was protecting behind me. You would have had to grind me to dust before I gave way, and even then I'd have found some way to stop you for their sake. Gaara lowered his head. I don't have anybody like that. The Konoha student shook his head. You will. Give it time. As long as you don't kill everyone you come across, you'll eventually find people to stand by you. Believe it. It took a moment, but Gaara finally smiled a little. It was a sad, anemic thing, but better than nothing. And Naruto wasn't going to let the silence grow. He sat back down. So, tell me about Suna. What's it like? How are the ninja trained there? And what food? I bet you have different kinds of ramen there. There was a moment of silence. What's ramen? Gaara asked, completely serious. Naruto's face fell, and he wasn't the only one. Most of the clones within hearing range had the same reaction, the few who didn't dashed out directly toward Ichiraku ramen. Clearly, there were issues that needed to be solved. Muramura walked aimlessly around the hospital. He'd cried all the tears he'd had in him, and still he felt wrong, like he was in a nightmare or something similar. That was why he hadn't updated everyone yet. Something like this would hit them like a physical blow, and he didn't want everyone to get it right out of the blue. He just ambled here and there, trying to make sense of everything. Hello, Muramura-san, came a voice from behind him. Glad to see you up and healthy. The clone turned around to see Irika a few meters back. He had a bandage over his head and his right ear was covered in gauze, but he seemed okay nonetheless. The Chunin teacher didn't miss Muramura's face, though. What's happening? He asked, unsure. The Bunshin lowered his head. He thought he'd cried all he could, but there was a sudden stinging in his eyes. Irika-sensei, he mumbled. Kuritori-sensei, he's dead. Irika's face fell. I'm sorry for your loss, he replied gravely. He knew the taijutsu specialist had become quite close to Naruto in his various forms, and that the boy had much respect for his newest teacher. You want to talk about it? Muramura's only answer was a small nod. Irika took his student by the shoulder and guided him outside, then back to his own place. He lived close enough that this wasn't a long walk, and preferred talking in private in case the prank was still going. He might be overthinking things, but the prank was still an S-rank secret, and treason wasn't on his mind. He sat Muramura down in his living room, then made tea for the both of them. With how rough their day had been, they both needed it. So Irika said, once seated opposite his student, who'd let go of his transformation. Tell me how it happened. The Bunshin took a sip out of his cup. We had seats on the east side of the arena. I got caught by surprise but he woke me up near instantly. I wanted to help him, but he kicked me away, sending me near one of the exits. That's the last I saw of him. He drank some more, then took a deep breath. Based on what the ANBU who brought him to the hospital told me, he eliminated a few enemies in his region of the stands without getting hurt too badly, then continued forward to other places where there were still enemies. One of the sound ninjas he encountered was a ninjutsu specialist, who controlled clouds of acid mist. Irika scowled. That was the worst type of opponent for a close-range specialist. They fought for a while at a stalemate, but the mist kept spreading, and it started getting close to people that were still unconscious in the stands. So, Kuritori, he the Naruto clone gulped. He ran straight in. At melee range, Kuritori took the sound ninja down in a minute, but by then it was done. He protected his eyes, but there was acid in his nose and lungs, and he could barely breathe. He still crawled forward, trying to help, and that's when the ANBU found him. His face lowered. I should have said no. That shook Irika out of his thoughts. What? He asked me if I was interested in seeing the finals, and he knew that, as an orphan, nobody could have brought me there. He sniffed. Maybe if I'd said no, he wouldn't have been in the arena and he'd still be alive right now. No, Irika replied sternly. You can't think like that, Naruto. He might have gone anyway, alone. And even if he hadn't, he would have fought, like everyone else. One of those giant snakes might have squished him, or someone might have detonated his house, or a dozen other scenarios. We can never know what might have happened, only live with what did. It should have been me, Naruto scowled. I'm a clone, that would have been better. The Chunin shook his head sadly. Kuritori might have thought the same thing, you know. What? He was old, Naruto. Close to his 60s. He was older than the Sannin, Irika explained. I can understand that you, as a clone, think he was more important, but in his mind, I'm pretty sure you were the first priority. He had 10, 20 years maximum in front of him, and probably even less, while you have nearly your whole life to go through. The old sacrificing for the young is the normal order of things. And I knew he'd outlived nearly everyone he'd known. He probably didn't want to see more die while he still survived. But the clone said. I went through the same thing when I was around your age, the Chunin teacher said, smiling slightly in remembrance. My first Jonin sensei, Hikaku, didn't like me much. I was a horrible prankster at that time, and he thought I wasn't taking things seriously enough. He rode me all the time, made me train and train and train until I thought I would die. There was always something else to learn, a next exercise to do, a new book to memorize. I didn't like him much at the time. What happened to him? My team got a C-rank mission in northern Yonokuni, and it turned out there was a Kumo team in the same area. That was before the peace treaty between Konoha and Kumo, and as such my team was ambushed right after our mission. Hikaku stayed behind, buying us time. Irika smiled a little. That was the last we ever saw of him. There was a moment of silence as Naruto digested that. My team got back to Konoha without any other issue, only to find ourselves not knowing what to do. We were stuck in the village until an investigation was completed, and I found out I had no clue what to do. My former teacher had kept me busy for so long that, now that he was gone, I didn't know what to do. Pranking seemed juvenile after what had happened, and I'd always relied on him for training. How did things end up? Naruto asked, curious. Our team's leadership got taken over by a compatriot of my former sensei. He was only a special jonin, but he did a good job continuing Hikaku's work. On one of the first days, he took us aside and gave us just about the same speech I gave you. He shook his head sadly. Turns out we were Hikaku's second team, his first having died during the Third Great Shinobi War. And he'd never gotten over that loss. My team had survived, so Hiko had said, and that was the most important thing to Hikaku. The rest was just details. Naruto reached out for another sip, only to realize his cup was empty. Irika smiled and poured him another. The clone had to admit it helped. The thought of Kuritori dying still hurt, but the idea that he'd succeeded in the end made it less painful. And having someone to talk to was a good distraction. Tell me about them, he asked. He wasn't ready for this conversation to end. Irika smiled. Well, you might not have known, but I graduated last in my class. Like it is now, I ended up with. Prank Day 111. You may come in, Hinata-sama. Your father is waiting for you, the Hyuga branch member said, bowing in the early dawn's light. Hinata bowed in return. Thank you, Hohito-san, she replied, rising. She then stepped inside and bowed once more before her father. Ota-sama, Hanabi-chan. Thank you for coming, daughter, Hayashi intoned. The clan has questions regarding your fight in the arena. That didn't surprise Hinata. She'd expected so, and had even prepared for this possibility. She'd thought about it until sleep finally claimed her late last night. Was my performance not to your liking? No, Hayashi quickly answered. It was satisfactory. He was silent for a moment. Please perform the Kage Bunshin right this moment, he then continued. Hinata's hands flashed into the necessary cross seal near instantly, before she actually thought about the request. She did, however, stop before completing the technique. May I ask why, father? She finally said, lowering her face a little. You may, the Hyuga leader replied. There are those who believe you must have had outside help during the battle, especially with this technique. The Hyuga genin nodded. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. She invoked, and an exact copy of herself appeared right beside her. Does this satisfy you, father? She asked. Hayashi's eyes flashed white for an instant before returning to normal. It does, regarding those accusations, he finally responded. There are other details, however, that require explanations. Hinata said nothing, waiting for her father to continue. Who taught you these techniques? He asked. I've already inquired with your sensei, and she has no idea where you might have acquired this level of skill. Who was your teacher, daughter? She had been expecting this question. I cannot tell you, Ota-sama. I have taken an oath not to reveal my teacher's name. That wasn't literally what she'd sworn, but the result was the same. She had promised not to reveal that Naruto knew the Kagebunshin, but since that was part of what she had been taught, simply revealing Naruto as her teacher implied that he knew said technique. Daughter, the techniques you have learned are dangerous, Hayashi replied, voice rising. They have side effects. I have been informed, Otosama, Hinata interrupted. My teacher made sure I had knowledge of them before even starting. Hinata had expected her father to argue longer, but he stopped for a moment. I suppose that explains you using that technique on your cousin only at the end of the match. She nodded. Indeed. And the medics have assured me that Niji will make a complete recovery. He will, however, have to be blinded until his recovery is complete. Hayashi nodded. That is good news. What was that, anyway? Hanabi added, joining the conversation. I've never seen Niji taken down so quickly. Hayashi turned to his youngest daughter. While it grants us numerous advantages, it is not without weaknesses, he explained. Our sight is more detailed than that of any ordinary ninja, and it is through this sensibility that this technique harms us. He turned back to his eldest. Hinata, demonstrate for us. Are you certain, Otosama? Hinata asked, unsure. I would not want to hurt any of you. He nodded. Use the bare minimum of power. This is only a demonstration. His head turned to the side. Hanabi, you are not to use your until I say so. Pay close attention, as this may save your life one day. Hi, Otosama, Hanabi replied, inching forward to see better. Hinata turned to the side and made the hand seals as slowly as she could, then pushed the least amount of chakra forward. Raitun, Mabushii Kagayaki. She invoked, and light flashed through the room. Hanabi grunted, shielding her eyes with her arm. Hinata instantly dashed at her sister's side to check up on her. Hayashi shook his head. Leave it. You performed the technique correctly, and whatever blindness it caused is temporary. Hanabi sat back straight. I am fine, sister, he confirmed, then continued. Can we see the other techniques you used in the arena? Hinata smiled. I will have to go get my equipment, and we will need to move to a stronger dojo, Hinata explained. The Wano Matsuri was not designed with rice paper walls in mind. She did have a few chakrams on her, but not enough to properly show the technique. The weapons she carried were reminders of her training, her successes, and Naruto's belief in her. Their simple presence was comforting. Let us do so, the Hyuga leader said, rising. Gather your tools and join us in the East Dojo. Come, Hanabi, he said, and she followed her father outside. Now alone in the room, Hinata couldn't help but smile. The only thing he'd said about her battle was that it was satisfactory. Coming from someone as strict as him, it was a straight-up compliment. She had fought more for herself and for Naruto, but her father's approval was still something she cherished. Hinata then rushed out. Making her father wait was always a bad idea, and she'd always liked spending time with her sister. And it seemed like it was time to dance for her sake. Naruto was waiting in front of the academy's doors. He wasn't alone there. Both his clones were present, along with the entire fashion squad and a number of other students. There were quite a few of his fellows missing, however. Some had probably skipped school after the events of yesterday, but it made Naruto feel guilty. And not only about Kuritori. Muramura had informed the rest of the council late last night, and had updated the rest of the clones afterward. Losing Kuritori hurt, especially since he'd finally started accepting the real Naruto. Now, he would never know about the prank. Muramura had also told him about the oath, and Naruto had agreed with the clone's actions. Saying no wasn't a choice, not at that time. What Naruto felt guilty about was the invasion itself. His clones were supposed to be an information network, and something big like an invasion had gone through without notice. Worse was, now that the fighting was done, there were dozens of details coming from the bunshins between Konoha and Suna that should have raised flags. Big orders of meat, medicine shortages, rumors of people in the forest. Hindsight was 20/20, but with the cost the invasion had. Iruka finally opened the doors, interrupting Naruto's thoughts, and the boy went right to his desk. The empty spots in the classroom seemed ominous, as did the people missing on the roll call. Then the door opened just as Iruka was about to start his class. Sorry to interrupt, Iruka-san, the Chunin exclaimed as he came in. What can I do for you, Chunin-san? The teacher asked. The ninja withdrew a scroll. The Hokage would like to see Joden Ariko, Uzumaki Naruto, and Niramaru along with you, Irika-san. The teacher rose. May I ask why? The messenger shook his head. I could not tell you, Irika-san. I have not been informed. I will, however, be replacing you until you return. Very well, he turned to the class. Please be kind to my replacement while I am gone. Joden-san, Uzumaki-san, Niramaru-san, with me. All three rose and went forward. As Naruto was the one furthest back, he caught the wordless message both the clones sent. We're fucked. Naruto could only agree with them. The whole way passed with Naruto trying to figure out how he'd been caught. He didn't fear the Hokage knowing, but didn't want others to figure it out. Did he do something during the invasion that broke the prank? Whose actions did it do? Reporting as ordered, Hokage-sama, Irika called out clearly. Naruto realized he was now standing right before the Hokage's desk, and hadn't even noticed getting there. Indeed, Joden Ariko, the Hokage, intoned seriously, taking a puff out of his pipe. Yes. The clone squeaked. Uzumaki Naruto. Hi, he said, forcing his voice not to squeak as that of his clone. Niramaru. Present. The male clone managed to keep his voice cool. Based on your actions yesterday, I am promoting the three of you to genin, effective immediately. You will form Team 1 under. What? The three Narutos yelled in eerie synchronicity. Sarutobi inclined his head to the side. Is there a problem? Irika was visibly holding back his reaction. No, Hokage-sama, there isn't. He bent in half, putting one arm around his stomach. I can't, he said, then lost the battle for seriousness. Wahahaha! He exclaimed as he fell to the floor. Yumino-san? Ah, come on, sensei! The three Narutos said again in chorus. Irika simply kept laughing on the floor. The Hokage turned to the three newly promoted genins. Can you explain this to me? The three looked at each other, all unsure to explain. Disguise off, Irika wheezed between bouts of hilarity. The three pouted, but did as ordered. 3 copies of Naruto now stood in the office, and Ichigo jumped from his current perch to the one standing in the center. The Hokage scowled. This kind of prank isn't funny, Naruto, he intoned clearly. Irika visibly disagreed with that opinion. Now, where are the real Ariko and Niramaru? Those words released a new wave of laughter from the Chunin on the floor. Scroll, he managed to say. Give him the scroll. Naruto withdrew the scroll Irika had handed him weeks ago, and gave it to the village's leader. He recognized it instantly. But what he started, then the pieces came together instantly in his mind. Naruto's transformation technique. The Kagebunshin. Naruto's prank, which involved returning to class. The required means, in this case money. The reason 2 academy students from outside the village had done better than most genin during an invasion. The Hokage nearly dropped his pipe, before putting it aside. He looked down at the papers before him. The reviews, recommendations, and comments that he'd gone through in preparation for this promotion. And he hadn't caught on a bit. He couldn't help but smile. He had all the pieces, and he missed it completely. Well, you caught me, he finally admitted with a laugh. You really got me. Prank Day 111. Everyone waited patiently for Irika to catch his breath. The Hokage snickered a few times, while the 3 Narutos stood uncomfortably, unsure of where this meeting would lead. It took a good minute before the Chunin managed to rise back from the floor. Apologies, Hokage-sama, he said, his breath still catching. Konoha's leader waved him off with a smile. No worries, Yumino-san. It's not every day that the Hokage is tricked by an academy student. He thought for a moment. Especially not for the second time. Second time? Naruto was crowned with a bunny. Oh yeah? The scroll. Sarutobi nodded. Indeed, the scroll. Now, regarding your promotion. Naruto shrank upon himself. It's not cancelled, is it? The Hokage shook his head. No. You've clearly proven you have the skill necessary for the rank. I might make changes to your team, but your new rank is final. He reached inside one of his drawers and withdrew 3-8. Would you like to do the honors? Sarutobi asked as he held them out to the Chunin teacher. I would be honored, Iruka replied with a bow. The Chunin rose and formally affixed the headbands on the temples of the 3 new genin, saving the true Naruto for last. I never doubted that you would succeed, Naruto. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder. He'd have ruffled his hair, but Ichigo was right there. He then looked at the other 2. Do me proud, students. Hi. They all answered. Welcome to the Ninja Corps, genin, Sarutobi continued, sounding like a proud grandfather. With the things you have already accomplished, I expect great things from you all. Yes, Hokage-sama. They replied cheerfully. Now, if you don't mind, return to your disguises while I discuss the situation with your teacher, Hiruzen continued. I'll make sure you are informed about what we decide. Do we need to go back to school? The real Naruto asked his teacher, clearly hoping it wasn't the case. Iruka shook his head with a smile. No, you don't. You're genin now. Anyway, I'm pretty sure you have training to do. Sure, sensei. Naruto continued with a smile, while the other 2 turned back into their previous forms. The 3 started walking out, only to stop as Naruto turned. Oh yeah? I was forgetting something. He faced his teacher. There's a council meeting tonight, and you're invited. We'll be going over the invasion, and there's a lot to discuss. Council meeting? The Hokage asked. You're invited too, Gigi. Tonight at 7. I'm sorry, Naruto, but I can't change my schedule that easily, Hiruzen sighed. I'm meeting with our sealing experts regarding repairs to our village's outer wall at that time. Send a shadow clone, then. I know very well you can use them. Naruto remembered him using a number some of the times he met his unofficial grandfather while younger. He hadn't known what they were at the time. Anyway, Iruka can give you the details, he smiled. I'll leave you 2 to your discussion. See you later. He then walked out along with his copies. Council meeting? The Hokage asked once more as he turned toward the academy teacher. Said teacher shook his head. You will have to see it to believe it. I didn't until it was right in my face. He straightened. Now, what did you want to discuss with me, Hokage-sama? Sarutobi took a deep breath. I will trust in your assessment of Naruto's skill, Chunin. What would you recommend be done with him in terms of a team? The teacher thought for a good minute. I'd recommend staying with the course you were already pursuing, Hokage-sama. Explain your reasoning, please, Hiruzen replied, indicating for Iruka to sit down. The Chunin did so. You are still seeking to create balanced teams, correct? Hiruzen nodded. Adding Naruto to any other team would unbalance it. He's now powerful beyond any normal genin, and even most Chunin. He gazed absently towards the ceiling as he considered his words. If he fought me with everything he has, I wouldn't stand a chance. He took Mizuki out easily, and that was before he began his current training regimen. I'm pretty sure he could give even special jonin a run for their money. You're not the only one who believes so, Sarutobi pointed out. I received a number of recommendations from current ANBU members that he'd be promoted straight to Chunin and placed in the ANBU Corps. I refused those, of course. We have no need for another Itachi. He shook his head. And I couldn't refuse him a Jonin sensei to help him grow. He looked straight at the teacher. Or do you disagree? I do not, Hokage-sama, Iruka answered. That is exactly why I'd recommend his clones as his teammates. With that scenario, even if Naruto is ignored in favor of the rest of his team, he will still attain the necessary knowledge. Something came to his mind right there. What were you planning in regards to his clones? Nothing. I am not seeing the utility of keeping them. Iruka shook his head. I would recommend doing so. His 2 clones have links with other people his age, and they're helping him socialize and grow. Removing them would draw attention without much gain. Having different team members would do the same, the Hokage pointed out. The teacher shook his head once more. Between the power disparity and the way Naruto is generally treated, I wouldn't go with that option. Even children his own age? Hiruzen asked, scowling. Iruka nodded sadly. He was about to add to this, but the Hokage's intercom chose that moment to come to life. Hokage-sama, the secretary interrupted. You have 5 minutes before your next appointment. We will have to resume this discussion later then, Saratobi said with a sigh. Irika nodded. If you could send a clone to the academy around 6, and we can continue then, he said, then added, and come disguised, or you might draw much too much attention. You'll have no problem dealing with a clone as a real person? Hiruzen inquired. Some people would be offended by something like that. Irika simply smiled. It won't be a problem, Hokage-sama. You'll understand better once we meet with Naruto tonight. He then bowed. By your leave. Go, Chunin. We'll continue later. The village leader then cleaned his desk and prepared himself for meeting the representatives of the Merchants Association. He did make sure to finish his pipe, though. He had a feeling he would need it. While Naruto was going over the problem of missing memories during the invasion and Muramura had launched himself straight into training, Ariko had another priority. She waited until the lunch bell sounded at the academy, then returned to meet the rest of the Konoha fashion group in its usual eating spot. Ichibo accompanied her, silent in his usual place in her hair. Finally, Asano called out as Ariko approached. We were starting to think something had happened. She gestured beside her, indicating where a spot had been left open. Sit down and tell us what went on. You didn't, Nishi said, eyes wide, as the clone came closer. Ariko nodded slightly, at which moment she jumped straight up and hugged the Kage Bunshin. Congratulations. The rest of the group also rose, though it was clear from their faces that they didn't understand. Ariko, Nishi, explain please, Fumichi finally asked. Nishi released the Naruto clone and stood to the side. You didn't notice? She said with a smile. Look at what's hanging from her neck. That was where Ariko had decided to wear her own headband. More eyes went wide. Aa Konoha Hittite? Asano exclaimed. You got promoted? Ariko nodded shyly. What followed was a girlish scream, along with a number of hugs and words of encouragement. It took a good few minutes before everyone managed to sit down. So, tell us everything. Mihoshi demanded once everyone was seated. How did it happen? What did the Hokage tell you? Were Muramaru and Uzumaki also promoted? Are you three gonna be a team? Whoa, girl. Fumichi interrupted. Give her time to explain. Ariko did so. She launched herself into an edited version of what had happened in the Hokage's office, keeping the discussion of the prank outside the story. Nishi raised her hand as soon as the clone was done. You still haven't told us who'll be on your team, she pointed out. I don't know, Ariko answered. The Hokage made it known that the team composition wasn't final yet. Fumichi nodded. They're probably waiting until they know for sure who will need to be replaced. At least one person will be promoted after the fights we saw, and that's not talking about genin losses, she said with a scowl, then turned toward Ringo. Why are you pouting? I had this all planned, she finally replied. We 6 were all gonna pass together, that way some of us might be on the same team. There might have even been a full fashion squad team. Her pout got worse. Now it's all ruined. Ariko had to agree it was possible. Compared to last year, there were quite a few more girls in the class. A little more than half, actually. Sorry, Kage Bunshin replied. Don't be, Fumichi said, her voice carrying the authority of the group's leader. You worked hard, and were rewarded for it. Don't let anyone take that from you. She then turned toward Ringo. You should be happy for your classmate. I am, Ringo exclaimed. It's just. Anyway, Mihoshi interjected. There was probably gonna be one of us alone on a team, at least. They might make a few teams this year with 2 girls and a boy, but never 3 girls, not unless they couldn't help it. The rest of the group nodded sagely. So, Fumichi continued after a pause. 3 cheers for the first Konoha fashion ninja to make it to genin. Hurrah! She exclaimed, throwing her fist in the air. Hurrah! 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 The rest of the girls imitated, their own arms rising in turn. They were unknowingly accompanied by a rabbit who clapped both his back paws and her hair along with them. Ariko smiled slightly, face somewhat down in embarrassment. She had to say it felt good to have her group support her like that. She'd been afraid they would take it badly, and having these doubts evaporate at their words was a great relief. She'd have to make sure to return the favor once they passed. Iruka was surprised when, 5 minutes before 6, a dark-haired boy around Naruto's age entered his office. It wasn't anybody he recognized, not one of his current students at least, and probably not even a former one. "Can I help you?" he finally asked. "Is the room secure?" the boy replied, clear authority in his voice. Iruka realized instantly who it was. He focused a few instants, trying to sense if there was any chakra out of place, then nodded. "It is, Hokage-sama." The bunshin of the village leader pulled a chair up beside Iruka's desk and sat, his form changing back to that of the elderly Sandaime. "It's been a while since I went out like that. Years even," he said with a smile on his face. "Well, you fooled me for a moment, at least. Excellent disguise." As a teacher, Iruka couldn't help but evaluate what was put before him. It had none of the usual tells associated with transformation techniques. "Well, I did use this form for many years, even if it was decades ago," the clone explained. "Anyway, you asked that we should meet, Chunin." The mood instantly went serious. "Correct, Hokage-sama," he replied with a nod. "Since the beginning of this academy term, I've been evaluating my fellow teachers and their actions towards Naruto." He went to his desk and withdrew a heavy folder from within another. "Here are the results of what I've found," he said as he handed Hokage the dossier. This is quite a number of reports," the Hokage's clone said simply by the weight of paper present. Iruka nodded sadly. "Indeed, Hokage-sama. And those are only the events for which I have tangible proof." The clone started reading and quickly advanced in the dossier. He stopped when he reached a large number of sheets clipped together. "What are those?" "Naruto's exams," the Chunin explained. "From every year. The red corrections are the original ones, while my own are in green." The Hokage's copy rapidly went over the first, second, and third. The pattern quickly became visible. "Are they all like this?" he nearly growled. "Yes, Hokage-sama," Iruka replied with his face down. "From Naruto's first exam to his latest." "This is more serious and premeditated than I thought," the Kage Bunshin said, dropping the folder on Iruka's desk in disgust. "It is worse than you think, Hokage-sama. Adding the revised grades together, Naruto would have gained 5 points to his final score, enough to give him the lowest passing grade the first time he tested for promotion." The clone rose to his feet instantly, and killing intent flooded the room. "You mean to tell me," the Bunshin's voice rang across the room, echoing with restrained power, "that the bias Naruto faced in the academy forced him to repeat his classes, and that twice?" "More than twice, Hokage-sama." The Chunin lowered his head in shame. "This year was his fourth. It is quite possible that, if it hadn't been for the battlefield promotion you gave him, this year's result would have been the same." "How about other students?" the clone continued, clearly trying to keep his anger reined in. "I cannot say. I lack the time to review every other student's exams. I would not be surprised in the least, though. Not after Mizuki." Iruka scowled at the reminder. Going over his former friend's documents had been illuminating. There were hints to his treachery well into the past. The clone took a deep breath to calm himself, then turned to the head teacher. "Keep order here for the next few days. As soon as the Konoha analysts are finished with the consequences of the invasion, I am sending a dozen of them here to go over everything. The last 10 years, if need be." He stared down at Iruka, who nodded. "Naruto may have passed, but I will make sure that no child wanting to be a ninja is ever refused due to the bias of a teacher." Iruka smiled and nodded. "You have my support, Hokage-sama." There was a moment of silence as the Kage Bunshin thought, before he fell back in his chair. "Hopefully, this disaster is the worst news of the day." "It should be," Iruka replied. "Council meetings tend to be fast and informal, and bad news tends to call for such an event instantly, not delayed as this one was." "You still will not give me any clue as to what I'll find?" the clone asked. He clearly wasn't used to information being kept from him. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," Iruka responded. "And anyway, it's time to leave. You'll see soon enough." The clone forced himself not to pout. It wouldn't help, and this situation clearly wasn't in any way dangerous. If it was, he could have ordered Iruka to speak. He let it be. He'd see soon enough, anyway. The tunnel was the first thing that surprised the Hokage clone. The hidden entry he used was perfectly placed, accessible, inconspicuous, and desolate. The path was small enough at first that one didn't think it would be used for travel, but still large enough to allow so. And it widened. And widened. By the time the two ninja were 100 meters in, the path was high enough for a normal man to stand tall. By 200, seal lights started appearing, though many showed signs of disuse. And after 400 meters, he finally came to a large room, bigger than anything he'd expected. High ceiling, flat and long. He saw here and there hints of the strengthening seals that were necessary for a place that size. But that was nothing compared to what was inside said room. Before him were lines and lines of people, standing at attention. Most of them were Narutos wearing different uniforms, but there were different faces here and there. He recognized Ariko and Muramaru, along with a civilian he remembered passing a few days before the invasion, whose name was unknown to him. Looking to the sides, the Bunshin realized that the lines did not limit themselves to the ground. On the walls next to him, scores of what he supposed must be clones stood rigid. Some were even on the ceiling itself. The Naruto closest to him stepped forward. "The Hokage is in residence," it yelled. Like a wave, all the clones bowed. "Welcome, Sandaime-sama." The many voices rang in the chorus. "May the will of fire burn forever." Luckily, the Hokage had been in situations like this one many times in his life. "At ease," he ordered, looking around as the many Narutos straightened. He noticed Irika smiling behind him. "I'll not stop you long." He looked around once more. Could the real Naruto come up? One copy did so. The only difference between this one and the many others was the rabbit standing on its head. Ariko's, if he remembered correctly. There was a story there, he was sure. "Welcome to the Uruhara basement, Gigi." At those words, Hiruzen was now certain this was the real thing. "Ready for the meeting?" he said with a smile. "I can clearly see I'll have quite a few surprises there," the Sandaime clone answered. "Still, no time like the present." Naruto nodded with a grin. "Council members, step up," he called, his voice filling the room. Muramaru and Ariko advanced a step, along with a number of other clones. The Hokage was surprised to see Gaara also present. The Hokage moved forward, then was surprised to see the former Kazekage's son bow. "Good day, Sandaime Hokage." "Good day, Sabaku no Gaara," the clone replied. "I didn't expect to see you here. I was captured by Naruto's forces during the invasion, and have been staying in this basement since then," the Sand Genin explained. "You do know that the Sand forces have surrendered to the Leaf?" Gaara nodded. "I do. I have personally surrendered to Naruto here." He smiled slightly at said boy to show that he didn't hold it against him. The Sandaime nodded. "Your sister did not participate in the invasion, as she was taken down beforehand," he informed the foreign genin. "And your brother was captured trying to reach her. Both have already been cleared for freedom under surveillance, and have been asking about you. As far as I know, no answer has yet been given to them." The Hokage's clone smiled. "You may want to come out of this basement sometime to meet them." Gaara thought for a second, then bowed. "I will ponder this and give you an answer later." Let's go," Naruto said, waving forward. "Time's wastin'." The village leader's Bunshin let himself be directed higher to a room where a long table was waiting. He took a seat at the place indicated, the very end of the table, and looked at the other participants as they took their own seats. There were clear differences between most of them, and one, to his surprise, was wearing a clown mask similar to those seen on the unknown Anbu that had saved the day. He nearly stopped to interrogate him, but then decided to wait. He'd grill Naruto about everything once this was done. When all were seated, there were still two empty, and Naruto was still standing beside what was clearly his chair. Gaara had taken a seat in a corner of the room and not at the table. "Wait a second while I call our last member," he said, and everyone nodded. His hands then flashed through hand seals, fast enough that it was clear this was a well-practiced technique. Sarutobi recognized it instantly. "Summoning technique!" Naruto yelled, slamming both his palms on the floor. An instant later, two rabbits appeared. The smallest, who was around Naruto's height, wore a blue hakama and bowed politely to Naruto. The second, who was as tall as a normal adult, inclined his head with a smile and took one of the empty seats. The remaining rabbit did not take the other, standing attentively behind his taller brethren. Only then did Naruto sit down. Welcome, all, to the latest meeting of those in the know. As you can see, we have a new member here. He smiled at the Sandaime. First, however, a moment of silence to those lost. He indicated the empty seat, then bowed his head. All the participants, be them clones or not, did the same. The Hokage was no different. He'd gone over the preliminary losses, and dozens he'd known had perished. Konoha had survived, but the price had been heavy. Head after head rose once more, and Naruto waited until all were done. Miramara's was the last, and no one seemed surprised. First, status report. He turned to the seated rabbit beside him. Nanabo, how's Monty? Mad but fine, the summon replied. Whatever wounds he had were superficial. Mad? Another Naruto clone asked. Nanabo nodded. Mad Monty hates people who use explosions or explosives. He smiled. He has been very clear that, if you ever find yourself facing this snakeman again, you are to call upon him. I'll make sure to do so, Naruto said. He did a good job this time, so no reason not to call on him. Perfect, the rabbit replied. Naruto with the clown mask rose next. As for clones, we've built our numbers back up. The only vacancy we have is the one right here. He pointed to the empty chair beside him. Right, Naruto said. Any suggestions? I propose to Nico, Ariko said. There was a chorus of nods. The real Uzumaki looked around. Any opposition? Nothing except shaken heads. Approved then. Nico's the latest council member, he confirmed. Merchant Network, make sure he's informed about it. 3 clones holding large books nodded. Okay then. Second point, the invasion, Naruto said, and you could hear the seriousness in his voice. We did pretty good for people unprepared, but we could have done a lot better. So, ideas for improvements, everyone. Hiruzen's clone was surprised by how well the meeting was going as the clones brought forth idea after idea. Accomplishing a third of what was being done here would take at least thrice as long in his regular meetings, if not more. Here, suggestions were brought up, voted on, and dispatched in minutes if not seconds. There were no arguments over who should do what, those tasks simply nodded in confirmation. He wished things could be that easy in his own councils. Anything not covered? Naruto asked, and received no reply. Done. Third, merchants. Anything that needs to be brought up? Nothing much yet, the center member of the bookkeeping trio answered. Civilian losses aren't completely known yet, so there hasn't been much on this side. Ichiraka came through without a scratch, but Shushuya's been badly hit, and the Konoha's Zenkyo was totaled by those rampaging snakes. Everyone in the buildings managed to reach a shelter without issue, but who knows how long before they reopen. Anything we can do to help? Miramara asked. Not yet, the merchant replied. We're planning on giving them their next delivery at cost, but nothing yet. Rebuilding is probably going to take a while. Everyone nodded, including the Hokage. It would probably be months before everything was cleaned up and repaired. Last one then. Training, Naruto exclaimed. We're done with the last batch of techniques, and they've proven their worth on the battlefield. We need new ones if we want to continue to improve. A chorus of nods answered him. So, for the next meeting, I want everyone to go over to our library again and bring up some suggestions. More nods. I have something to add, the unseated rabbit interrupted. Every council member turned in his direction. Go ahead, Naruto said. Miyamoto nodded. Ichibo, he said, and a rabbit rose on Naruto's head. You've been training alongside Naruto for more than 3 months now, and you've made no progress. I am sorry to say, but you should abandon the way of the sword. But Ichibo stuttered. I'll do better. Miyamoto stopped him with a raised paw. It is something you cannot fix. I have tried training dozens like you before, and the results were the same. It is nothing based on the effort you make, you are simply not made for using a blade. Ichibo lowered his head in shame. However, another has accepted taking over your training, the rabbit continued. Monty has agreed to train you in his personal fighting style. As he possesses a frame similar to yours, I suspect you will find it much easier. Ichibo's head stayed down. Grandson, Nanabo's voice rang out. There is no shame in this failure. Miyamoto was clear that you've given your best, and that is all that can be asked of you. Everyone has his weaknesses. He smirked. To this day, I haven't managed a single fire technique, and not for lack of trying. And I still lead the rabbits. Hi, Usagi, Ichibo said in a small voice. The rabbit leader released a bark of laughter. How many times did I tell you not to call me that? Naruto rose in defense of his partner. Why not? I think it fits. Not you too? I call for a vote, Naruto exclaimed. Those in favor of Nanabo having the title of Usagi, raise your hand. The vote was instant and unanimous. All hands raised, including those of Hiruzen and Irika, who shared a smile. Miyamoto's hand was up in support right behind his boss, and Ichibo shyly raised his hand last. All opposed? Nanabo rose from his seat right there, hand straight up. The 7 staves in his bag did the same. But the results were already clear. Motion passed, Naruto said, pounding his fist on the table. Usagi, please return to your seat. Nanabo did so with a pout, but one could clearly see his lips wanting to curl into a smile. Anything else? Naruto asked, and only received negative responses. The meeting adjourned then. Next one in a week, barring emergencies. The Hokage's clone waited in his chair while the others filed out. He nodded to Irika, who left. Gaara came forward as the last was exciting. The Kage Bunshin had noticed the boy was pensive during the entire meeting, and suspected that the San Genin had finally come to a decision. Hokage-san, what steps would I have to take to be able to meet with my siblings? The boy asked, face neutral. How involved were you with the invasion? Sarutobi countered. Very little, Gaara replied after a moment's thought. The sole demand that was made of me was to release the Ichibi when the sleeping struck. I had no information when this was to happen, or what else would be involved. And once the moment did come, I was too damaged to do so completely. The Hokage nodded, and grabbed 2 pieces of paper from the table. On the first he wrote signed instructions and a name, while on the other he wrote directions along with the time. He handed the boy both. Follow the path written on the second note, and give the first paper to the ninja whose name I have written down. He'll ask you more questions about the invasion, and will bring you to the rest of your family if you are cleared. The San Genin bowed once more. Thank you, Sandaime-san. He then vacated the room, which left the Hokage's clone alone with his predecessor's son. So, Gigi, what do you think? Well, it's certainly impressive, the Hokage said. But I'm quite certain I haven't learned it all yet. Naruto smiled. Pretty sure, what did you want to know? Everything. Naruto raised an eyebrow. There's a lot to go over. You have the time? Yes, the clone said seriously. Tell me all. Naruto raised his eyes and thought for a moment. Well, he said after a moment. You know when it started. Mizuki gave me his extra exam, and I went. The Hokage's Bunshin was surprised to see light coming out of Irika's office in the academy as he passed by after coming out of his meeting with Naruto. It was nearly midnight. Said clone, still in his natural form, knocked and entered the head teacher's room. You keep late hours, Irika-san. The Chunin simply smiled. You're not the only one who's a clone right now, Hokage-sama. You Hiruzen started then stopped. Right, Naruto has been teaching you. There had been so much information in that discussion that not everything had sunk in yet. You understand now why I said you had to see to believe? Indeed, the Hokage replied with a nod. Even with the proof I had, I can scarcely believe it. He basically turned the invasion around by himself. And that combination of techniques. Dangerous, isn't it? Irika said. Yes, but so effective. And there are so many forbidden techniques that might be safe for clones. I've noticed, Hokage-sama. I'll have to think about this, about how to place him best. Something then came to mind, and Sarutobi smiled. If he stays alive, he'll be one day, I am now certain. Truly? It wasn't that Irika doubted Naruto could achieve his dream, but it was a completely different thing to hear the current holder of said post say it with such certainty. He's done more at his age than any before. Even when Night Aim suggested it to me, his eyes stared at the distance for a moment. Hadn't something like this to my account? And if he continues to grow at this rate, where do you see him in his early 20s? Irika thought for a moment. Jonin, clearly. Possibly even multiple times. Indeed. He'll be close to, if not already at the level of the Sannin. And who in Konoha is around that level? Hatake Kakashi, maybe? With Guy not far behind. He thought some more. Your son Asuma might reach that level too. And none of them are interested in the post, the Hokage replied. Furthermore, they don't have the temperament for it. Kakashi's chronic lateness would be a disaster there, and Guy is difficult to approach. Asuma would be better, but the time he abandoned Konoha to work for the fire court would hurt him. There was a pause. I do now agree with your earlier assessment. He is much too talented to put on any regular genin team. The Irika clone smiled. That reminds me, you've never said who you had in mind for their Jonin sensei. Hiruzen's Kage Bunshin told him. A smile crept on the lips of the teacher's copy. And will you tell him about the prank? The Hokage shook his head. I wasn't planning to. After the report you gave me this afternoon, I prefer to err on the side of caution. I made sure to give Naruto the scroll with my signature. Irika released a burst of laughter. Naruto will run rings around him, I'm certain. Prank Day 112. But Hokage-sama, what about your grandson? Sarutobi sighed and grabbed his pipe. After taking a good puff of tobacco smoke, he fixed his eyes on the special Jonin before him. Ebisu, he started, and the man stood at attention. This is not a punishment, but an opportunity. You are among the best trainers in Konoha, and a dozen cases prove your mastery in training others. But tell me, Ebisu, the Hokage asked, how many genin teams have you trained? How many genin under you went on to the next level? None, Hokage-sama, the lower-ranked ninja finally admitted. Indeed, Sarutobi replied. You made it clear that, come Konohamaru's graduation, you wished to lead his team. Did you think I would give my grandson to an improving teacher? But Ebisu started, only to be interrupted. You've trained no team, you just told me, and I will not sacrifice 2 students just so my grandson is prepared properly for ninja life, the Hokage explained. As such, I am giving you a chance to prove yourself beforehand. How? Ebisu gulped. How so? You will train the team I put before you, and be their Jonin sensei. You have 2 years for them to be promoted to Chunin, and if you do so I will personally ensure that you lead my grandson's team. Ebisu's eyes went wide. All of them? 2 out of 3, at least, Sandame answered. The special Jonin's eyes fell down to the folders he'd been given. Must it be this team? A clanless kunoichi, an orphan from outside the village, and another orphan? Now we get to the root of the problem, Hiruzen thought. But that's not what he said. This is an easy team for someone of your talent, he answered instead. I have a number of letters that recommended Uzumaki Naruto skip the genin rank completely as he would be too skilled for it. Muramura here redirected an attack from Orochimaru himself to save me, while Joden Ariko has 12 takedowns in her name during the invasion, which even included a special. I don't see you having too many issues having them promoted. But Ebisu started, then stopped. But they aren't clan members, the Sandame completed in his head. It was well known that Ebisu's difficulty at getting promoted had made him believe that only clan members could reach the top ranks, never mind all the exceptions. He wasn't the only one. Teams without clan members had the unfortunate tendency to fail any Jonin's personal exam. In the last 3 years, only teams with at least one member of a clan managed to reach actual genin rank. And no clan member failed during that time. Is this a task you do not believe you have the ability to perform? The Hokage asked, even though he already knew how the special would answer. I can find another, if you cannot. He left out the implied meaning that this included Konohamaru's future team. Of course not, Hokage-sama. Then you have your orders, Ebisu, the Hokage exclaimed, making the decision final. You are now the Jonin sensei of Team 1. They will be expecting you tomorrow at 8 in the morning at Training Ground 7. Prank Day 113. Naruto was the last to arrive at Training Ground 7, being barely on time. This was on purpose, as Gigi had confirmed that the prank was still going on, that his 2 clones would be his teammates, and that his teacher would not have been informed. As so, he made sure to arrive as late as possible while still being on time, as a diversion. His 2 copies were already there, as was the man he supposed would be their sensei. He was tall and gangly, and seemed uniformly forgettable. What he wore only helped reinforce that fact: dark blue shirt and pants, cloth of the same color hiding his hair, and dark sunglasses that hid his eyes completely. Outside the Konoha headband on his head, everything else was camouflaged. "You are the man," said, glaring down at Naruto. "Seconds from being late. In the future, please make sure to be present 5 minutes early in case of an emergency, correct?" There was quite a bit of ice in the man's voice. "Yes, sensei," Naruto replied. "Well, since everyone is finally there," the special said, looking at everyone in turn. "I am Shikomu Ebisu, and I have been selected as Jonin sensei for Team 1. I am ranked as Tokubetsu Jonin, and am a specialist in various forms of training. As a person, I enjoy teaching others seafood and certain types of literature. My personal goal is to train someone who goes on to become Hokage." He smiled. "Now, the same from each of you. As a team, we will be working and bleeding together, and as such we should trust each other. And sharing secrets is the foundation of trust." Naruto grinned. The man wanted to teach Hokage. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto," he answered immediately. "I'm a genin, and I suppose a ninjutsu specialist. I like training, ramen, and pranks. My goal is to become Hokage one day." Ebisu did not react except for a tightening of his traits. "Next one?" he said, looking at the other 2. "My name is Miramara," the clone said, fully serious. "And I'm both a genin and a taijutsu specialist. I like improving my sharp fist, sushi, and learning about the past. My own goal is mastering the sharp fist and teaching it to the next generation." Ebisu nodded this time, then turned to his female student. "Your turn." "I'm Joden Ariko, and the little guy upstairs is Ichibo," said Rabbit Waved. "I'm a genin, a member of the Konoha Fashion Squad, and I suppose a range specialist. I like playing with my partner, meetings with the rest of the squad, and yakiniku. My goal is to make sure we members of the Konoha Fashion Squad go as far up the ranks as possible." Ebisu nodded again. There didn't seem to be any animosity between the 3, which was always a bonus. "The Hokage has tasked me with making sure that this team will be promoted to Chunin within the next 2 years. As such, I will be pushing as hard as I can to make sure you are ready for the rank." "Now, as to training," the sensei said. "Our days will be split into 3 periods. From 8 in the morning to 1, we will be here, training. This period will be focused on team exercises, physical training, and combat scenarios. Each of you must have had a good breakfast, as we will not break for lunch until 1. From 2 to 7 will be missions," Ebisu said as he continued his explanation. "I will be selecting them, and I expect the best times possible from all of you. With luck, we might clear multiple missions every day. Since a number of completed missions is necessary for advancement, I suspect it is in everyone's interest to have as many as possible, until your belts. Lastly, from 8 to 10 will be individual training. I will alternate between all of you, and work on either improving your talents or eliminating your weaknesses. I shall still expect 2 hours of training from those I will not be visiting," he said while looking directly at Naruto. "Am I being clear?" "Yes," the 3 students chorused. "Then, we will be starting right now with an evaluation," Ebisu continued. "Every or skill each of you can use. Those not performing will be listening attentively. Knowledge about an ally's techniques is crucial for proper battle planning. I expect, after today, that everyone here will possess good knowledge about his teammates' capacities. Now, Ariko, you go first." Ebisu watched intently as the 3 went and showed their abilities. This might not be his preferred team, but he was a professional. He would give the work his all. Ariko seemed like a pretty basic kunoichi, though the she knew for empowering thrown weapons was effective. Miramara seemed pretty much your usual taijutsu specialist, but him already knowing the tree-walking technique was a clear advantage. He probably had the chakra control necessary to start on elemental. The Uzumaki child was the biggest surprise though. He could use the shadow clone technique, both normal and mass versions, something that was unheard of from a child that age. He also had some bizarre fire sphere technique, which Ebisu supposed was the boy's element. The blonde genin also professed proficiency in high-level trapping techniques, though that wasn't something he could demonstrate easily. All in all, Ebisu supposed this wasn't a bad haul. The first two students didn't have much more than the basics, but what they had was at least a good start. The Uzumaki kid didn't seem as good in his basics, but what he had more than compensated for the deficiency. He could work with that. He'd started with much worse in the past. Prank Day 114. It was a bright, sunny day in Konoha, and Naruto felt it didn't fit with the mood around him at all, his own included. He was dressed in his finest, Irika beside him. Ariko was a little farther down the path with the rest of the fashion squad, while Muramaru was to his left along with Ebisu. Today was the funeral for the Chunin who had fallen during the invasion. The genin would be honored tomorrow, while the few fallen would have individual funerals after that. The civilians, on their side, were slowly being buried all through the week. The will of fire is a hard thing, Sandaime intoned clearly from his position at the podium. It is a flame in a person's heart that warms, protects, and feeds them. Like any flame, it must be carefully tended to let it either go out or consume everything. He forced himself to stay rigid and not to react. Under his original face, Kiritori had only been his teacher for a few months, with no special bond between them. He was supposed to be a random face in the crowd of mourners, and nothing more. And that was the most difficult thing he'd ever done. The Hokage continued. Sometimes, however, there are lives that are sacrificed to the pyre. Young, old, it is beyond the realm of men to decide when one passes away. None can delay when the Shinigami comes for them, each in their own time. He focused on the words Irika had shared that very afternoon. Kiritori had been old, and he'd gone willingly to battle. He'd fought as long as he could, and had passed the torch. Naruto had to do honor to his teachings. Therefore, he simply sniffed and held back. Irika's hand squeezed his shoulder lightly in understanding. He didn't know what he'd have done if the Chunin hadn't been there. Each man and woman we honor today answered the call with distinction, and fought until death took them. They were fathers, mothers, teachers, comrades, and so much more. Their actions have shaped the present and future, and now they rest with their predecessors. The Hokage looked around, then bowed his head. A moment of silence for the fallen Chunin of Konoha. The village lives on, and they will be sorely missed. A wave of lowered heads followed, Naruto's being no different. Sensei, rest in peace with your family, Naruto whispered near silently. We'll continue in your stead. Muramaru couldn't say he remembered much of the funeral. Unlike Naruto, he could show how he felt, and he didn't let the opportunity pass. Even now that it was over, there were long traces left behind under his eyes. Ebisu, who had stood beside him the whole time, quietly led him away. The clone thought his newest sensei was accompanying him home, but the two of them ended up in a small apartment on the opposite side of Konoha. It reminded him of Irika's place, even if everything was arranged differently. In particular, there was a glass bookcase full of colorful tomes in a clear place of honor. He sat down on a sofa while Ebisu went and gathered items from his kitchen. 2 cups and a small pitcher were placed on the table as the teacher took a seat opposite him. He filled both cups with liquid, putting one before the clone, then raised the other one. To those gone, he said simply. Muramaru grabbed his own cup and slowly raised it. As he did, Ebisu drank his own in one gulp, and the clone followed suit. The liquid burned as it went down, and the bunshin nearly choked. I am, as a person, not greatly fond of alcohol, but I cannot deny there are times where it has helped people, the special said. And many drink themselves under the table to avoid the pain of loss. Since the funerals continue tomorrow, Team 1 will have the day off, and as such you may drink as much as you wish. I will make sure you do not suffer because of it. Really? Muramaru asked. Ebisu nodded. You are a genin, and as such an adult in the eyes of the village. It is well within your right to drink as much as you wish. My former sensei said the same thing when my own mother died long ago, and it still applies now. Muramaru thought for an instant. As much as forgetting the pain sounded good right now, it wouldn't help in the long term. And he didn't want to reveal something he shouldn't while impaired. A second later he remembered that clones couldn't even get drunk, so that idea would have been a bust anyway. The clone shook his head. No thanks, sensei. I'll have to learn how to deal with it. I have to go forward. The words stuck somewhat in his throat. Ebisu nodded, and pushed his glasses back up with a single finger. Indeed. Then, this is the next step to the path. He withdrew a scroll from his side. What is that? Your masters will, Ebisu replied solemnly. Muramaru's breath caught. Already? The teacher nodded. Yes. Wills in Konoha are generally read as soon as possible after the funeral, unless foul play is suspected. This is because they may contain time-sensitive materials, contracts, and the like. Is there anything urgent? The clone asked. Ebisu shrugged. I do not know. While, as your sensei and legal representative, it is within my rights to do so, I prefer not to without your consent. Muramaru was silent for a moment. Could you look it over? If there's anything urgent, he didn't want to let Kuratori down, but he'd prefer to do this with the rest of the Narutos later. The special nodded, then broke the seal. He read quickly through the document, eyes clearly going over every line. There is something about an oath. I've already made the oath, Muramaru announced. The reminder actually helped. While it had been made as Kuratori lay dying, it also brought back the satisfied smile on his master's face as he passed away. And such smiles had been rare from the man. Ebisu was silent for a little longer, then put the scroll down. There is nothing here that can't wait a few more days. There are specifics about your training written, but they can wait until you regain your mental equilibrium. Muramaru lowered his head. Thank you? Ebisu shook his head with a smile. No thanks are needed. As your sensei, it is my job to teach you all I can, and not all lessons are for the battlefield. There was a moment of silence before the clone rose and took the scroll in hand. I'll be going now. The special nodded. Take care of yourself, he replied. We will see each other in 2 days when training starts again. And do not hesitate to contact me should there be any issue. I will, the student answered seriously. He then bowed and left. On the way back home, Muramaru couldn't help but break into a small smile. The man might be rigid and serious, but he cared. And to the various Naruto clones, that was more than enough. Prank Day 115. Naruto ran. Since every genin he had been close to had made it through the invasion unscathed, he hadn't planned on going to this round of funerals. He'd first thought of spending the day with Gaara, but the Sand Genin had instead decided to follow Sarutobi's instructions and hopefully meet with the rest of his family. Naruto wished him luck at that. Miyamoto had then come up and decided to take the opportunity to make his day off a full day of sword training. This morning, he'd been tasked with summoning dozens of lesser members of the rabbit court, small brown rabbits no larger than Ichibo or Monty. Said rabbits had then been equipped with blunted kunai and shuriken, and let loose in a zone of forest 20 or so kilometers from Konoha. In one way, they were his opponents today, even though he wasn't tasked with going after them. He was going to be their practice target. Naruto batted a shuriken out of the way, passing less than an inch beside the trunk of the nearest tree. He then diverted a kunai off course, not stopping for an instant. He'd quickly learned that the slower he went, the more projectiles would find him. The forest course Miyamoto had crafted was multiple straight lines through the woods, each half a dozen kilometers in distance, their path indicated by a length of string. He was to stay on the ground the entire time he ran while the many rabbits pelted him with blunted steel. He could use no techniques beyond dodging and sword work. And dodging alone wasn't enough. He was allowed 30 minutes of rest at every checkpoint before starting again, and even then Miyamoto used that time to instruct him in proper blade care. Right now, he was on his 4th stretch, and Miyamoto had added an extra level of difficulty. Sheath! The rabbit samurai's voice rang through the trees. Naruto instantly did so, not stopping his run. It still took him a couple of seconds, and a training kunai scraped his face as it passed. His blade clicked home, and he didn't pause for a second before drawing again. His swing parried a pair of incoming weapons, and he dodged the last one with a quick movement of the head. And he kept on. The sun was falling when Miyamoto finally declared the exercise complete. After a dozen different stretches, Naruto was glad the exercise was done. He was sweaty as all hell, aching everywhere, and incredibly hungry. He'd eaten at some of the checkpoints, but not enough to really count. As soon as he was clean enough, he was gonna buy enough ramen to feed the entire ninja corps for a day. Drawing position! His rabbit sensei yelled suddenly. Naruto reacted instantly, taking the Ayajutsu position he'd been taught. and even 10 clones stepped forward, copies of his own sword in hand. This is the last exercise for the day, Naruto, Miyamoto said. You are to defeat these 10 clones by yourself. Naruto nodded, and the Bunshin charged forward. His first strike upon drawing burst 2 in less than a second, and his follow-up claimed a third. He dodged 2 strikes, parried the next and slid forward, making the clone he just blocked and a second one behind him vanish. A single jump back gave him space to maneuver, and he sheathed his blade once more while in the air. His next baton strike claimed only a single clone, as the remaining Bunshin were cautious, and the rest fell quickly to Naruto's quick and precise strikes. That was way too easy, Naruto said as he stored his katana. They weren't coming at me seriously. They were, Miyamoto said, shaking his head. Those were simply the 10 clones I asked you to make before we started on this exercise. They showed the exact level of skill you had this morning. Tell me, why were they so easy to dispatch? The genin thought for a moment. Well, their attacks were easy to see coming. They also stepped much too close for the he started, then realized what he was saying. After the numerous weapons he'd blocked, most of those not as easily seen, directed strikes by visible opponents weren't much of a challenge. He also knew from experience the exact range of his attacks, something his clones didn't, at least not to the same level. Even if they were moving at the same speed, he had a clear advantage. Indeed, the samurai confirmed with a nod. Normally, seeing improvement in oneself is something difficult, but your technique allows you to face yourself without much difficulty. Now, as a student, was this exercise fruitful? Yes. Naruto exclaimed, then bowed. Thank you, sensei. Miyamoto smiled. No thanks are needed. A hard-working student is all the reward a teacher needs. As I said before, this is the end of training for today. Good work, Naruto. You make your teacher proud. The rabbit then bowed and vanished. Naruto didn't wait and turned toward Konoha instantly. He had a speed-eating record to beat. Prank Day 117. Come in, Irika said after someone knocked on his office door. It was early in the evening, and the teacher was going over the paperwork necessary to keep the academy running smoothly. Naruto came in. Hey sensei, he said with a smile and a wave. Good evening, Naruto, the Chunin replied. I'm surprised to see you willingly coming to the academy when you no longer have classes here, he added with a smile. Ha ha ha, Naruto replied blandly. Well, if the student will not come to the teacher must go to the student. Irika inclined his head. What do you mean? Did you think your training was complete? The genin asked. You may be able to use the Kage Bunshin now, but that alone doesn't bring you anywhere close to being a. Oh, the Chunin said, realizing now what this was about. Right. I do have a lot of paperwork to go through though. Kuritori's death had not helped things in the academy. There hadn't been a replacement dispatched yet. Leaving a clone behind won't be enough? Irika shook his head. How about I leave a few clones behind to help? The teacher nearly said no automatically, then thought over it. Before, as Naruto was still a student, this would have been unthinkable, but now that he was a genin, things were different. Having access to exam corrections wouldn't help him anymore, and he was no longer in competition with the former members of his class. Everything you learn in this room stays in here, correct? Naruto nodded empathically. No funny stuff? No pranks? More nods. Irika rose. I'll trust you then. Do not make me regret it. His hand then flashed into the cross seal of the shadow clone technique, as did Naruto's. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. The two real ninja then left the office as the Irika clones started ordering the 4 Narutos left behind. They went straight to the tunnels, and were halfway to the Uruhara basement when Naruto turned to his teacher. Can I ask a question? Of course. What's the deal with those D-ranks? The genin asked. Those can't be real missions. Irika smiled, having asked the same question to his own teacher a long time ago. They are. Naruto, do you think you can put any 3 newly minted genin together and make an effective team? Naruto instantly thought of Sasuke, and quickly shook his head. Of course not. Still, I'm sure there are enough real missions for a new team. Couriers and the like, possibly. The teacher shook his head. Take the members of your class, and pit each of them against 3 mildly talented bandits. Who do you think would win? The students, of course. Iruka raised an eyebrow. Every single time? There was a moment of silence. No, Naruto finally admitted. Unfortunately, not all students come with the same level of skill, Iruka explained. Some are better with while others are stronger or faster, some are better in theory and others in practice. The D-ranked missions are used to help evaluate students in various domains. For example, have you had to run after a cat recently? Naruto's eyes went wide. How did you know? Iruka smiled widely. The Fire Lord's wife has always been fond of cats, and even has a specific breeder for them in Konoha. She is, however, not as good at keeping them with her, and many have escaped repeatedly. I had to hunt one of those cats myself, years ago. What about it? Well, hunting that cat is like a beginner-level scout and capture mission, Iruka explained. It requires the same skill set, and is a good tool to test their genin in stealth, scouting, and non-lethal capture. How about mending fences? General handicraft, along with the ability to follow orders and teamwork, the Chunin replied. Teamwork is the main reason why some sensei might keep students from progressing to higher-level missions, and that's not something one can be sure about after only a few days. Naruto pouted, but said nothing. The 3 of them had been on Team 1 for less than a week, and there had been 2 days without training. He couldn't deny that it wasn't enough to be certain about the team's skills. Naruto himself hadn't even met with Ebisu in the evening yet. The teacher and student found an empty spot to train in as soon as they arrived in the Uruhara basement. So, what's the schedule, Uzumaki-sensei? Iruka asked with a smile. Anything special you want to work on? The blonde ninja asked. Iruka thought for a moment, but nothing specific came to mind. Surprise me, he finally said. Naruto sat pensive for a minute, then nodded. A couple of hand signs later, a black ball formed in his hand. You're handy with barrier ninjutsu, so let's go with something similar. Iruka stared. You know that this is a kinjutsu, correct? Yes, the genin nodded. It's a lot less dangerous than the other techniques I know, though. At least as long as you don't purposefully put too much fire inside. He released the sphere and only a short-lasting flame appeared. If you don't put fire chakra inside, it's no more powerful than a generic fireball. Iruka nodded. How do the seals go? Naruto made them one by one slowly. The first thing to focus on. Prank Day 118. Sasuke stepped into Konoha and instantly saw the issues there. The hole in the wall was a big clue, but the inside was showing numerous signs of destruction as well. What had happened here? Well, that explains the early recall, Kakashi said with an eye above his orange book. Sasuke could see his single eye taking in the details, building plans and scenarios in his mind. His sensei might be lazy, but Sasuke couldn't deny the fact he was also a genius. The 4 of them went straight for the Hokage Tower, which at least seemed to have come through intact. On the way there, they crossed paths with Hinata Hyuga, who was wearing a Chunin vest. He scowled at the sight. If a wallflower like her could have made it, he was a shoo-in for Chunin. His team was what was holding him back. After the first exam which Sakura had abandoned at the last question, he ranted and raged at her to prevent him from being promoted. Sakaki took her side, saying the team wasn't ready yet. He didn't care about the team. He needed to grow stronger as quickly as possible. Then Kakashi rejoined them and confirmed that, yes, the entire group wasn't ready. By then, Sasuke's rage had control, and he yelled at his sensei, blaming him for the current state of things. Kakashi endured his words stoically with his usual smile, then asked a single question as Sasuke tapered off. Are you a leader or a follower? Neither of those. He yelled back. He was an avenger, a lone wolf. He didn't need people slowing him down. Kakashi stared down at him with the most serious look he'd ever given him. Then, you aren't a ninja. Ninja are either of those, and nothing else. If that's what you want, I'll go right to the Hokage and have you removed from the rolls. Why? Why only those choices? Kakashi scowled behind his mask. Because no single person can take on a well-led 3-member team of their level. The only way to fight such a group is to defend all the time, and wait for a mistake. And each member of a team can cover for the other's mistakes, he explained in full seriousness. So, are you a leader or a follower? He repeated. Leader, Sasuke finally said, looking to the side. It was the better of the two choices. Then lead, their sensei said. You have two people here who'd follow your orders, so give them. Sasuke couldn't deny that. Sakura would throw herself into fire if he asked, and Sakaki clearly respected his abilities. They'd listen, at the very least. So he took another angle of attack. Aren't you supposed to be this team's leader? No, I'm this team's sensei. I may be your superior, but that doesn't mean I'm the one to give all the orders. I'm simply here to teach and protect you. Does the Hokage manage every single genin team? He's their ultimate superior. The white-haired man asked rhetorically. Sasuke grunted, while the two others simply shook their heads. Why don't you teach then? Sasuke asked, grasping at straws. I've come to you for training dozens of times, and the only thing you said is that I wasn't ready. Kakashi's stare somehow got harsher. Because I train a team. Did a team ever come to me for training? Silence was his only answer. All had come alone requesting training. I thought as much. The next day, Kakashi got Team 7 a 2-month C-rank patrol mission on the border between fire and grass, and Sasuke started pushing his teammates hard. Surprisingly, both of them took it seriously, and Kakashi never held back when asked for valid exercises. The worst he did was tell them they weren't ready for something, and when he did that he always had something to help them along the way. Team 7 reporting as ordered, Kakashi said as the group finally managed to meet with the Hokage after more than an hour's waiting. He then handed the village leader a scroll which the Hokage quickly read. Good, Sandame replied as he finished. A calm border is always a blessing. Team 7 dismissed. Kakashi, please stay behind. The three genin split then, each going their own way. Sasuke simply ambled, looking at the changes to the village and listening to the conversations. He wasn't in a hurry to get to an empty home. He was buying a tomato sandwich when he saw the dead last of his class walking toward the mission office. With a Hittite. He stepped to the side to watch the proceedings while better hidden. The tall man behind Naruto was obviously his sensei, which meant this wasn't some form of prank. And that made the two others beside him his teammates. The boy wasn't anybody he remembered, but the girl was that one fangirl he'd brought to Konoha. A shiver went through his back in remembrance. Naruto could keep her. He wanted nothing to do with that girl. As the three genin disappeared, Sasuke realized that the next final exam for the academy wasn't until months in the future, and that he'd passed in the last. That meant that Naruto's promotion wasn't through the normal channels. Sasuke finished his dinner in 3 quick bites, and returned to his information gathering. If someone like Naruto had managed to pass, that meant that big things had gone on while he was gone. And not only whatever had caused all damages. Information is power, and he wasn't going to be weak in any domain. His quest depended on it. Ebisu stepped forward onto Training Ground 6, which he'd reserved in the evenings for Naruto Uzumaki's training. He'd verified the last few days, and the boy was using said spot for training in the specified hours. Good, at least he was taking this seriously. He remained in hiding and watched as his student trained. The Uzumaki boy was fighting what was clearly a clone. They were going at each other with katanas in hand and no other weapon. The special frowned. This hadn't been in the list of skills the blonde genin had given. Yet, watching him, it was clear that Naruto wasn't a beginner with the blade. His movements were fluid, precise, and quite fast. Ebisu himself wasn't specialized in kenjutsu, but he had no issue evaluating the skill level of students. Still, he needed to be sure. He withdrew a couple of blunted kunai from his vest and threw them at the pair, yelling incoming. As he did so, the two Narutos reacted instantly. The first easily batted the kunai in flight, while the other jumped, turned, then deflected the flying weapon. I don't seem to remember kenjutsu being in the list of skills you profess knowledge of, Ebisu said as he stepped out of his hiding post. Why is that? Well, Naruto replied, scratching the back of his head. I'm not that good. I'm getting better, but I'm not to the level I can call myself proficient yet. Ebisu shook his head. You are quite above the average level of a genin, which is more than enough for it to be noted. He looked down at the boy. Any other skill of note you might have forgotten to reveal? The Uzumaki boy launched himself into a complete skill listing. He repeated the items he'd originally revealed, and added quite a few more. Ebisu had no clue what the Oiroke and harem techniques were, had no easy way of testing for stealth, though he had to admit that the boy had made a good showing against Tora, and had seen nothing special in the boy's basic 3 techniques. The teacher then made a decision. "Stop," he said, and his genin did so. "You and I will be having a full contact spar, that will let me evaluate you properly." Naruto's eyes went wide. He hadn't done so with his clones. "You sure? I wouldn't want to hurt you." Ebisu straightened haughtily. "I am a special. I doubt you could really harm me." Naruto wasn't convinced. "How about you use a shadow clone? I've noticed you can use them." "And how did you get that information?" Naruto shrugged. "I noticed you watching yesterday. Actually, it was his clone who had. And I asked Ariko this morning, who confirmed that you spent the entire 2 hours with her. Since there's not much use to sending an ordinary clone, that basically means a Kage-kunshin." Ebisu nodded, accepting the reasoning. "Indeed, I can use them. You would prefer fighting a clone?" Naruto nodded. There was nothing lost in humoring him, so Ebisu generated a single clone. His reserves being what they were, 5 or more would be tiring to him, but he didn't think he'd need more than the one he made. The first part of the battle went as he'd expected it. Naruto generated a wave of clones, dozens strong, and they charged forward swords in hand. The clone dispatched a few with a fireball, then used rapid replacement to dodge and hunt unprepared clones. The teacher's Kage Bunshin had things well in hand when the one clone jumping toward him turned into a very naked and very stacked amorous girl. This distracted the clone for a second, but that second was all the Naruto's needed. The Ebisu clone found himself switched with another father in the battlefield, and a bursting black sphere took him a moment later. "What was that?" the special asked, baffled. It might simply have been a clone, but it still had all the instincts and skills of the real thing. That fire technique would have seriously hurt if not incapacitated him. Naruto generated another sphere. "I showed you that one, didn't I?" "No, that he pushed his glasses back into position, flustered. "That transformation you did." "Oiroke no," Naruto explained. "It's a distraction technique I invented while in the academy. It even took out the Hokage once." He didn't say that the reason he did so was because Muramura had noted the Hokage's favorite Eki book in a place of honor in Ebisu's apartment. The sensei took a deep breath to steady himself, then turned to his student. "One more time, if you don't mind?" He summoned another clone as Naruto nodded. That match lasted a lot longer. Ebisu was now prepared for the distraction technique, and didn't get caught. He dispatched clone after clone, but the numbers were endless, and after a long fight the teacher's Kage Bunshin finally vanished, having spent everything it had. "So, sensei?" Naruto asked as all the clones disappeared. "Well, it is clear you have energy and stamina to spare," the special finally said. "Your techniques are also well practiced and used effectively. One thing I did notice, though, is that you aimed all of your attacks directly at your opponent. How is that an issue?" "Well, to give an example, those 3 beams of fire you shot simultaneously, do you remember them?" Ebisu asked. Naruto nodded affirmatively. "Well, all 3 were aimed straight at me," the teacher continued. "Now, what did my clone do?" "He jumped to the side," the genin answered. "Exactly. Now, say one beam had gone straight for me, with the other 2 a foot or so on each side. What would have happened then?" Ebisu asked with a smile. "He would," Naruto said, thinking out loud. "He would have had no choice but to replace himself." "Indeed," Ebisu nodded. "One thing to remember with attacks as powerful as your fire sphere is that hitting your opponent is more important than overpowering him. The injury one of those inflicts is enough to hurt if not incapacitate a normal opponent. Sending your attacks wider makes them more difficult to dodge, meaning they have to waste chakra to survive. And with your reserves, you're winning if you cause such an engagement." Naruto smiled and nodded. "Thank you, sensei. I'll remember that. Anything else?" Ebisu thought for a moment. "Well, I noticed you count a lot on your clone cover for defense. What would you do if you couldn't use it? Like during a stealth mission, in a small space or against someone who can track the real you?" The blonde genin had to admit the idea had never come to mind. I don't know. What do you recommend, sensei? Well, it depends on the situation, Ebisu started. In a confined room, you might want to. Prank Day 119. The Sandaime had received a note this afternoon, when Team 1 came requesting missions, that there would be a council meeting tonight. He smiled when he'd received it. The last time he was present, he'd mostly been a bystander, as he'd not had all the information necessary to make valid decisions. But this time, he had had an entire week to think about it, and he had a number of requests to put forward. Going to see Iruka in the academy ended up being pointless, as the real thing was already in Naruto's base training. As such, he made his way alone in the tunnels, once more disguised as his younger self. Luckily, he remembered the path pretty well. There wasn't an entire army at rest this time. The clones were now in groups here and there, clearly training in different techniques. A single Naruto then waved at him and switched right before his position. Hey Gigi, he said with a smile. Good evening, Naruto, the Hokage thought for a moment. Are you the original? Yup, Naruto answered. I was training while waiting for you. You're the last missing member. What were you training in? Hiruzen asked. Combining the replacement and the tree-walking techniques, he created half a dozen clones, then they were gone the next instant. 3 appeared on the walls and managed to grab on after skidding for about a foot, while the 3 others tried for the ceiling. Only one of those managed to stick a foot in time, the other 2 bursting before they reached the ground. Interesting, the village leader said, looking around. I do not see Iruka. Is he already upstairs? Naruto shook his head. No, he's up there. He pointed toward the ceiling. Sarutobi found the Chunin straight above their position. The man was sticking to the ceiling and fighting clone after clone with kunai and sword. An effective training method, I have to admit. One had to both fight and manage his chakra at the same time, and this position made certain methods of dodging impossible. You aren't worried he might hurt himself in that fall? Naruto shook his head and pointed toward one of the pools. There a dozen clones waited, all their eyes on the combat. They're there to switch with him if he falls. Head first in water is a lot less painful than on raw earth. Not wanting to be dunked made for a good reason to put one's best effort forward, too. It took a minute, but Iruka finally finished the clones remaining on the ceiling since Naruto had stopped spawning more. He looked down and, seeing the Sandaime there, quickly made his way down to join him. Good evening, Hokage-sama, the Chunin said as he was offered a towel. He then wiped his face before handing it back. Good evening yourself, Chunin. I am happy to see you training hard, Hiruzen said with a smile. Will I be seeing you in the trials one day? I hope so, Hokage-sama, Iruka answered. It is still some way off, but I hope to one day give a good account of myself there. Good. I'll be waiting, Chunin, Sarutobi replied. Now we have a meeting to go to, do we not? Of course, Naruto said, making a cross seal, though no clones appeared this time. Let's go, he added with a wave as a number of Bunshin made their way in the group's direction. It didn't take much time for everyone to be seated. This time the rabbits weren't summoned, leaving Ichibo the sole representative of that group. Hiruzen also recognized the new face there, even though it was another Naruto, which he supposed was Nico. Okay all, welcome to the weekly meeting of those in the know, Naruto exclaimed from his spot at the end of the table as soon as everyone was in place. Sorry for the extra day between meetings, but I was busy with Ebisu yesterday. Status report. No one had much to say there. A couple of everything fine along with a somewhat longer report regarding a group called the Torison. It took less than 3 minutes for the point to be closed. Merchants, you're up next, the real Naruto said as the others finished. How's the network doing? Better and worse at the same time, the clone in the middle of that group replied. We've gotten a few new customers through Tucci, but the general trend is that people order less. I can't say if it'll pick up once more when repairs to the village are done, but I hope that's what happens. How about our saboteurs? Kyuha asked. The Hokage moved forward, very intent on this subject. Ninja operating in his village without his knowledge wasn't something that should be happening. No trace of them, not since they abandoned their base, the merchant clone replied. They may have abandoned this type of work after what happened, but we have no way to be sure. We still have guards with every shipment, just to make sure. A number of clones nodded, and the subject was closed. Information Network, your turn. Nico was the one who rose. We have a lot of data, rumors and the like, but no way to know what to focus on. Even with clones, sorting that information takes hours if not days. Worse is, those sending the reports have no idea what should or shouldn't be included. That ties into something I wanted to bring up, the Hokage said, rising. If I wanted to have someone else sit in on these meetings, what would be necessary? Naruto shrugged. You're the Hokage, Gigi. You can pretty much bring who you want, the real boy thought for a moment. Who did you have in mind? My spy master, Sarutobi answered simply. He's currently out of the village, looking for Orochimaru, but he should be back within a few days. He'd probably be the best person to put your information network into shape. I don't see any issue since, as spy master, I suppose he can be trusted with the prank. Hiruzen nodded at that. Any issue? He asked around. Nobody brought any argument against it. Done then, Naruto declared. Information network, keep piling up your data. We'll have a specialist helping us starting next week. Anything else, Gigi? Indeed, the Hokage said with a smile, drawing a pile of scrolls from his pockets and putting them on the table. What are those? Miramara asked from his place beside Naruto. It was clear that the rest of the clones were also curious. These, Hiruzen said, taking one of the scrolls in hand. These are requests from ANBU members to be transferred to the Dukeshi. The Dukeshi? Irika asked, and was echoed by a number of clones. I've never heard of them. His group, the Hokage continued, handing the scroll to Kyuha who sat on the opposite side of the table. The clone still had his ANBU garments and his bizarre hair color, though he'd removed the mask. What? The clone exclaimed in surprise. That's not all, Hiruzen continued. I've had 3 different meetings this week where I had to pretend that I knew everything about the Dukeshi, and that I'd personally created them as an anti-invasion force. Some even went up to me demanding names. Naruto lowered his head. Sorry, Gigi. Don't be, Sarutobi said with a smile. I had a good laugh about it. Your team probably saved the village dozens of casualties, if not the entire battle. Me having to pretend knowledge is a small price to pay compared to that. What should I do with this? Kyuha asked. Check them, the village leader replied. I'd like if possible to have actual members of the Dukeshi in existence, in case it ever becomes needed to make a public showing. I'd like this place to remain hidden for as long as possible. A trump card, if you will. Kyuha nodded and reached for the rest of the scrolls, which were duly handed to him. Anything else? Naruto asked everyone. I have one last thing, Hiruzen said, still up. Naruto nodded. Go ahead. I have another job for one of your clones. A female one, this time, the Hokage explained. Which is? Secretary, Sarutobi said. My current one has left my employ, and it is the perfect place for one of your clones. It would allow you to pass information to me easily, it would prepare you for the work you'll have to do if you ever take my place, and would permit me to reach you easily. He smiled widely. That fact that you can be trusted with such a position is also a great help. Naruto thought about it for a moment. One more clone wouldn't hurt, not at the level they were. Anything special you need for that clone? Not really, the Hokage started, then stopped. Actually, yes, the man said with a smirk. A specific henge, actually. One that will allow me to notice her more easily. Anything else that needs to be discussed? Multiple no's answered him. The meeting concluded, next one in a week. Everyone made their way out, save Naruto who went to the Hokage. So Gigi, tell me what you need. Well, first, this tall. He indicated a height with his hand. White blonde hair up to the shoulder blades. Naruto did his first transformation. Whiter than that. Reddish brown eyes and... Prank day 120. Miramara had pushed it back as long as possible, but he could no longer do so. He'd finally mastered the last training exercise of the sharp fist he'd been taught, and he needed guidance to continue. As such, it was time to read Kiritori's will. The clone had postponed it until now, as after it things would be final, and his fellow Narutos had followed his lead. This was the last message from his fallen sensei, and waiting gave the illusion that he was still somehow there, if only in part. Still, he had to keep on and not stagnate. He'd sworn to keep the style alive, and as such needed to master it completely. Ebisu had confirmed that there were instructions for him inside, and these could no longer wait. The first part was read through quickly. It was all legalese, pointing out the disposition of his assets and properties. Then came the man's burial requests. A plot had been reserved for him beside his wife and children, and other miscellaneous details. And last was a personal message for him. Muramaru. If you are reading this, it means I have died. My plan was to update this document upon your graduation. As I didn't, I have either died before then, or was unable to update it at that moment. I do not know how I died. My health was no issue upon writing this document, and I cannot predict what might have caused my death. Regardless of what it was, I will ask you for one boon. Do not grieve unnecessarily. It took your entry into my life to recognize that, before you, I had been waiting for death to claim me. My reasons might have been valid, but I can now see that I passed dozens of opportunities for growth and happiness because of that. As your teacher, I urge you not to follow my path. You have great things before you. Do not let sadness hold you back. The second thing I must do is thank you. Not only did you bring me out of my spiral of despair, but you made me feel needed once more. You have no idea how much I needed that, and for that you have my eternal gratitude. I know I am not the most demonstrative of masters, but be certain that I am proud of you. I am honored to have met you, and am full of pride at your growth. You were, and still are in my mind, my youngest son. I had planned on adopting you formally post-graduation, but it seems death had other ideas. As such, the Hyojin name is yours if you wish. I do not know what happened to your previous family, and it has no impact. I know that you will bring the Hyojin name honor if you choose to use it, and, should you not, I will understand. It is you who is important, not what name you carry. Regardless of your decision, I have placed the properties I own and most of the funds I've acquired in your hands. Do with them as will, they are yours without restriction. Lastly, the sharp fist. In what little time I've known you, you have already made good strides in the family style. I am certain that you will continue to do so in the future, and I have left behind scrolls to help you on your way. But first, the oath. If you have already recited the oath before at least 2 witnesses, you may skip this part. If not, please do so before continuing. I personally swore the oath before my Jonin-sensei, my teammates, and the Hokage himself, and I am sure he would make himself available for such an act. Once you are oath-bound, return to the dojo where I trained you. Hidden at the back of the calligraphy on the walls are seals, which contain the scrolls written by my ancestors, my family, and I. The seal at the bottom of this document will be required for you to open them. There will be a scroll with your name on it there. It points out the normal path taken through the style. You may deviate from it as you will. I did the same when young, as did my father and his father before him. I know you will do the style proud. Now go, and do not look back. You brought an old man happiness in his last days. My time is gone, and yours is only beginning. Remember me fondly, and I will see you once more in the far future. The rest of the family and I will be waiting for you on the other side. May the will of fire always be with you. Hyojin Kuritori, 11th head of the Hyojin family. Muramaru cried as he read the words out loud, and he wasn't the only one. The real Naruto before him was standing stoically, tears flowing freely from his eyes, while Ichigo was on Ariko's left shoulder with a much-used tissue. The 4 of them were the ones who had been in the arena on the fateful day, and the ones who'd been in most of the classes with their former teacher. What will you do? Naruto said between sniffles. About the name? That was the main point left to discuss. The oath was done and training would go on. Muramaru thought for an instant. I'll ask the Hokage. He'll know better what it implies. He smiled a little through the tears. I'll take it if I can. Both Ariko and Naruto nodded at that. The 3 then split up, Naruto going back downstairs while Ariko left for her own place. Muramaru took a few minutes alone to cry his last tears, then stood and went straight for the dojo. He needed to do honor to his style. And from the next day on, he was known as Hyojin Muramaru, 12th head of the Hyojin family. Prank Day 122. Ebisu wasn't much of a drinker. He had his own vices and knew about them, and preferred them to the loss of control that came with alcohol. As such, there was only a single reason that he went into bars. That is, to socialize. He wasn't much of a social person, but there were things that could only be learned from people. As such, he went once a week to the bar most frequented by the higher-ranked ninja of Konoha. The fact that the many Jonin sensei in the village tended to gather there was only a bonus. "Hey, look who's here," a special Jonin at the counter said. The great teacher himself. That was his own nickname, which was only used in places like this one. He hid the fact, but he was always proud of it. "Around on me," the man continued. "For the newest of those saddled with brats." "Here, here," came the cry from most of the ninja around. Ebisu stood stoically as people rose to offer him congratulations, or to commiserate with his loss of freedom. He'd expected such a spectacle, which was why he'd skipped last week's visit. Luckily, it didn't last too long, and he found himself free to take a seat at a table he never sat at before, though he'd never been far. The Jonin sensei's table. Currently, both Sarutobi Asuma and his on-off girlfriend Yuhi Kurenai were present, along with 3 of the older Jonin sensei. Kakashi was absent, which wasn't surprising, and Guy was out of the village at the moment, as were most of the others. "Congratulations on your team, Shikoma-san," the female teacher said as he sat down. "Congratulations on the success of your students, Yuhi-san," Ebisu replied as he took a small sip of his drink. 2 promoted out of 3, that is a very good result, especially counting on the shortened tournament. "I can't take credit for Hinata," she immediately countered. "Someone else trained her, and this teacher got more results in a month than I did in 3. Whoever he or she is, that is the person who deserves those words." "Then congratulations on Shino's promotion," Ebisu continued. "He was clearly one of yours, and he showed it in the arena. I nearly didn't pick up his myself." Kurenai simply lowered her head to hide her slight blush. Asuma came to her rescue. "How is it, having your own kids to deal with?" "Tiring," he answered. "Even with the many students I've trained before, 3 at the same time is exhausting." He sighed. "I don't remember having so much energy at that age." "Don't we all?" one of the older said. "Still, I can't complain. The 3 of them already work well enough together, and they don't shy from training." Ebisu continued. "It could be worse." Another of the older sensei turned to him. "You've got the blonde menace, right?" he finally said. "That and 2 civilian genin?" Ebisu nodded. "I wouldn't want to be in your shoes," he exclaimed. He should never have made it out of the academy. He didn't see the dark look the 2 younger sensei gave the man. The special shook his head. "No. While it is clear his basics need work, he is more than talented enough for genin rank. His chakra capacity is absurd, and he has the tools to use it. Close up the holes in his education, and he'll be more than ready for promotion too. If not farther," he mentally added. "You're shitting me," the older replied. "He's not," a new voice added from behind Ebisu. "I've seen the kids work, and I can believe it." The special had to think for a moment before the man's name came back to him. "Kanden-san, was it?" The stocky nodded in confirmation. "I did not know you worked with Naruto." "More like I was called to verify his work," Takuno answered. "I'm probably Konoha's foremost specialist in traps, and he got me. Easily at that." He smiled as he recalled the memory. "With good training, he'll be a trap specialist right soon, mark my words." He did specify trapping as one of his main skills. Ebisu thought for a moment. "What do you recommend?" he then added, moving the empty chair beside him for the joining to take a seat. Takuno quickly accepted the invitation. "Well, there's quite a bit. The boy's wire placement is good, so chakra wires are a natural next step. Fuinjutsu is also a good one, as he's." The discussion between the 2 lasted for more than an hour, and by the time they were done they were the only ninja remaining at the table. Ebisu had a scroll full of notes, since he never trained a trap master, and Takuno was clearly happy to discuss his main area of talent. The special realized how late it was when he reached for his glass and found it empty. It was his 3rd one, which was 2 more than usual. "I'll have to go," he finally said, rolling the scroll back and slipping it inside a pouch. Want to continue some other day? Takano asked. Ebisu nearly said yes, then realized something better. Are you often busy in the evenings? He asked instead. The shook his head. Not unless I'm on a mission. Ebisu smiled. Naruto trains alone in the evening, 6 days a week, in Training Ground 6. Would you be interested in teaching him a few days here and there? Would I ever? Takano said, rising from his chair. He'll go far, and all the better if I can help on the way. Then I'll be glad to have you as an assistant teacher for one of my students. I'm sure you'll do better than me on the subject of traps. The sensei extended his hand to seal the deal. The two men shook with a smile. It was the beginning of a new partnership. Prank Day 125. Jiraiya, as the member of the Sannin remaining in Konoha, was well known by the population. As such, he strolled straight from Konoha's doors to the Hokage Tower. He scowled as he passed the zones most affected by the destruction. He saw the invasion as a personal failing. He was amongst those who knew Orochimaru the best, and was Konoha's spymaster to boot, only for something that big to pass by him. It shouldn't have happened. Worse was the fact that he'd lost the man's trail. The tracks had gone cold not long after he'd entered Rice Country, and he'd wasted 3 days trying to find the hide or hair of his former comrade. He'd had to give up and go home without results, something that ate at him inside. As an important part of Konoha's military, no one stopped him, even once inside the Hokage's tower. Only the ANBU did so on average, and they were keeping to their posts. So, he went straight for his sensei's office. Jiraiya didn't become spymaster by not paying attention to detail. He logged 3 different rumors to follow up on, noted one missing ANBU member, and noticed that the Hokage had gotten a new secretary. As he did for any new person in the tower, he committed her appearance to memory. Long white hair, flowing straight down, split straight in the middle. Almond-shaped face, with expressive reddish-brown eyes. The Sannin estimated her half a foot short of 2 meters. He also wasn't surprised at the size of her bust. Hiruzen was known for certain tastes, which Jiraiya had inherited as his student. Hers was impressive, even seated behind a desk like she was. His eyes noted the last detail right as he pushed open the door to the Hokage's office. There was a small plaque at the side of her desk with her name on it. Tsuya. It took half a second for that fact to reach Jiraiya's brain, and he froze right there halfway in the door. He stopped like that for a second as facts clicked inside his mind. Then he stepped backward and turned toward this Tsuya. Yes, can I help you? She asked, inclining her head to the side. Jiraiya cringed. She even had the voice right. Can you stand up for an instant? She thought about it for an instant. Sure, she finally answered, and rose from her chair. Jiraiya noted that he'd gotten the height right, then imagined her wearing green and gray, and paled as the result came to mind. He had a sudden urge to get right out of the city and find his female teammate, just to make sure she didn't step within 100 leagues of this place. Instead, he took a deep breath and charged inside the Hokage's office. Good, Jiraiya, I was starting to worry, Hiruzen said as he looked up from a document. What do you have for me? The Sannin ignored the question and made sure the door was closed behind him. Then, he activated all the security seals he knew about, which was most of them. Only then did he fix his teacher with a glare. Sensei, why do you have the star of my first Ika book sitting behind a desk in front of your office? Sarutobi smirked. Sometimes, revenge is living well, with a good treat for the eyes. Also, age and treachery will always beat youth and skill. Jiraiya's glare intensified. You do know that if Tsunade ever sees her, I am a dead man. And that is if I'm lucky. If I'm not, she'll keep me alive for years just so I suffer more. You're exaggerating, the Hokage replied. She's one of the 2 people who came closest to killing me, and that was simply for peeping. The Sannin exclaimed. If she finds out I based one of my characters on her, there's no saying what she'll do. He thanked the kami every day that Tsunade's hatred of perversion kept her from reading his books. I'll take care of it if it ever becomes an issue, the Hokage said, closing this discussion. Now, what about your mission? Orochimaru's gone to ground in Rice, Jiraiya replied. I leveled at least one of his bases there, but I can bet it's not the only one. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some in the surrounding countries either. Prisoners? A few, but no one important, the Senin replied. The place I wiped from the map was clearly a staging area, probably for the invasion. I'll have to extend my network in Rice, as it is clearly either compromised or ineffective. That brings another point I wanted to discuss. Hiruzen pressed a button on his desk. Yes, Hokage-sama? Tsuya's voice came from the intercom. Tsuya-san, please bring my guest an IT, if you would. Green with sugar. At once, Hokage-sama. They didn't have to wait long before the secretary came in, carrying a tray. She offered a cup to Jiraiya first, then to the Hokage. She then stood to attention. Your will, Hokage-sama? For when is the next meeting of those in the know scheduled? Hiruzen asked with a smirk. There was something in there, Jiraiya could tell. Barring extenuating circumstances, tomorrow evening, Hokage-sama, the woman quickly answered. Thank you, he replied, and handed her a pile of folders. Please file these with their respective offices. Be careful not to miss anything. Tsuya bowed. Of course not, Hokage-sama. By your leave. Hiruzen nodded, and she quickly made her way out. The room was silent for a moment before Jiraiya spoke up. Do you know if she has any acting experience? 'Cause I heard they were planning a movie based on my first novel. If he was going to die, better to do it for something great. Again, Sarutobi smirked. You'll have to ask her yourself, Jiraiya. The twirl of the Hokage's lips clearly indicated he knew something more about this. Anyway, give me a complete report of your projects. I'll have something for you to work on, barring any emergencies. The sage took a sip of his drink and sat down. Well, first is Orochimaru. His tracks died 2 kilometers for Tagure, and nothing I could do allowed me to get anything else. He's been. Prank Day 126. Jiraiya didn't know what to think of the current situation. He was currently a shadow clone, hidden under one of his least used disguises, following his sensei Hiruzen, who was disguised as a 14-year-old version of himself. He'd been surprised at the hidden path they'd taken, not at its location, but at its existence. As spymaster, his knowledge of the city was greater than any, save possibly his sensei, and he'd not known about this path. It would have been something else if it had been newly built, but all indications were that it was older than that. The sage estimated that it was at least 10 years old, and quite possibly much older. The clear lack of maintenance made it difficult to ascertain a date specifically. The Sannin dropped his disguise the second Sarutobi removed his, which was when they came in sight of what he supposed was their goal. He was even more surprised to see his godson waiting right at the gate. Good evening, Hokage-sama, the blond boy said in welcome. Good evening yourself, Hiruzen replied with a wave. Can you point me to the original, or is he already seated and waiting? The false boy smiled. I can't get one past you, Hokage-sama, he answered as he turned. He's farther back, training with Irika. How did you catch me? The real Naruto would have called me Gigi, Sarutobi replied as he stepped forward. And I notice you clones keep from doing so. The Bunshin bowed. Step inside, Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-san. The two did so, but Jiraiya stopped once he'd made a single step inside. The place was huge, etched straight into the stone, and every few meters there was another Naruto. They were doing just about everything, reading, training, laughing and eating, with no visible rhyme or reason. His sensei walked forward as if this scene was common, waving at welcoming clones and calling others by name. He quickly arrived at a large group of what he supposed were Bunshins, all watching something in the middle of the mob. A place opened itself for Hiruzen without him saying a word, and Jiraiya sneaked right behind the man and looked over his shoulder. Both what he supposed was the real Naruto and in his 20s were blinded and fighting with wooden swords in the middle of the ring of onlookers. The many reports he'd gotten from Hiruzen about Naruto's life gave a good idea who the man was, Yumino Irika, one of his godson's closest allies. The two fought some more while the two elder ninja watched. The two were evenly matched in movement speed, but it was clear that Irika was better at fighting blind, while Naruto's kenjutsu was visibly more polished. As such, the two were pretty evenly matched. 4 more exchanges came and went before Irika managed to sneak in a hit with a kick to the shin. It wasn't powerful enough to hurt severely or incapacitate, but it put Naruto on the defensive. Iruka didn't let the opening pass, and attacked relentlessly. His greater strength made it so the boy was forced backward more and more, until a well-placed hit finally managed to disarm him. Game! A clone on the side yelled. TCH, Naruto scowled as he removed the blindfold. You're much too good at this. It comes with experience, Iruka replied with a smile. I have a few years on you still, and blind fighting was something my first sensei focused on much. You'll get better in time. Indeed, Hiruzen said as he stepped forward. You're already better at this than most genin, and there are some things that only time can help master. GG. Naruto exclaimed as he turned. I hope I didn't make you wait too long? He shook his head. Time spent watching the youth of Konoha improve is never wasted. Now, everything is ready for the meeting? Of course, Naruto said, crossing his hands together for a seal. Jiraiya had expected more clones to appear, but no such thing happened. Instead, the hands came apart after a second, and he made his way toward the side of the building. Various copies joined him, as did Iruka and Hiruzen. A bunny even jumped from head to rest in his hair. The Sannin wasn't far behind. It didn't take long for everyone to be seated around a long table. Jiraiya's own seat was right beside his sensei's, and the many clones clearly had specific places. Iruka was right next to the real Naruto at the end of the table. You want to lead the meeting, Gigi? Naruto asked. The Hokage shook his head. Your place, your group, your show, he countered with a smile. Knowing his sensei, he appreciated the fact that he was an equal around this table and not the one everyone looked up to. Right, the boy said with a nod. Welcome, members, to the meeting of those in the know, Naruto exclaimed. For the third week in a row, we have a new face here. Please welcome the Toad Sage, the self-proclaimed super pervert, Jiraiya of the Sannin. The sage smiled and bowed, saying nothing. Being a talented spy, he knew when to talk and when to listen, and this was clearly the second. There was too much here that was unexplained for him to step forward. Also, for those not informed, let me introduce the latest head of the Hyojin clan, Hyojin Muramaru. He continued. Said youth rose and bowed formally to those at the table. He then quickly took back his seat. Everyone here is busy, so let's make this quick. Status report, Naruto said, turning to a clone with a big book beside him. Said reports passed quickly. The merchant network was still waiting on the rebuilding, the Dikeishi hadn't finished going over the possible recruits, the Torisan was still doing police work, an agreement hadn't yet been reached on what to train in. As always, Jiraiya made note of everything, committing it to memory. There was much information in there, and if he wanted to figure this place out he would have to go over it more than once. Naruto looked around as everyone finished. Does anyone have anything to bring up? Gigi? Outside the request from last week, no, Saratobi said with a shake of his head. My newest secretary's work is more than satisfactory, and the quick access to information is perfect. That's between Nico and our newest member, Naruto said, looking toward Jiraiya. Have you informed him of what's required of him? No, Hiruzen said with a smile. I wanted him to see this place beforehand. Jiraiya countered with a smirk. You want me to whip his network into shape as an information-gathering tool, he replied with seriousness. Are you sure you didn't give him a hint? The Hokage's secretary is part of your group, and she's feeding information to the Hokage, he explained. You have a number of merchants on your payroll, and judging by the number of people representing them here, they are numerous enough to gather information. I heard about the Torisan, and they're a mercenary group currently stationed in Wave, which means your sources aren't only in the village. With the invasion that just passed, it's simple logic to deduce that you aren't satisfied with your current information network. Naruto's face went slack under surprise. He is my spy master for a reason, you know, the Hokage pointed out. Meeting adjourned? Naruto nodded quickly. The meeting adjourned, he quickly said. Nico, Jiraiya, please stay behind. We'll go over what the network needs to be useful. Jiraiya looked to his sensei, who was rising from his seat. A simple nod confirmed that he was to stay behind. I'll be waiting for your report about this in our next evening meeting. He put his hand on Jiraiya's shoulder. Good day, student. You'll see we had much less to fear about your godson than we thought. Try not to stay too late, old man, Jiraiya countered with a smirk. I'll catch you later. Indeed, the Hokage said as he walked out. The rest of the participants had already done so, leaving the sage with his godson and Nico, who was clearly a shadow clone. Why he had the name Jiraiya hadn't been figured out yet. Well, at least you've done your work, Jiraiya finally started after a minute of silence. I'm Jiraiya, sage of toads, well-known writer and the envy of all those who like the pleasures of the flesh. I'm also Konoha's spymaster, though that detail evades most. From what you said, you already have a network. How many people are in it? Naruto and Nico looked at each other, clearly unsure. Depends on your definition of people, I guess. The sage sighed. Contacts? Pen pals? Informants? None received an answer. Outside of you, who's part of the network? Well, Nico here for sure, Naruto started. Sannin shook his head. Clones don't count. That means Naruto answered. Gigi and Irika. And you, I suppose, he quickly added. Jiraiya scowled. He was clearly missing something. You mean that every one of your contacts is a clone? Naruto nodded. That was going to be the shortest lasting spy ring in the history of man. Why? The sage asked. Why not? Shadow clones are easy to make, have great communication, and can use techniques. They're perfect for such things. And how long can you maintain a clone, brat? Jiraiya replied, starting to get irritated. Naruto looked at Nico again. The record's 140 days. The clone nodded. Yes. The first big training group. They've taken hits, but most council members are from that generation. What? Jiraiya roared, rising from his chair. You mean that Miramara boy? Clone, Naruto pointed out. The genin girl? Clone, Nico countered. The ANBU member? Jiraiya said, clearly grasping at straws. His jaw was hanging wide in surprise by now. Clone, the two Narutos chorused in a sing-song voice. The Sannin fell back into his chair. And, including clones, how many contacts do you have? Nico fell back to the folder that was before him. I don't have exact numbers in clones, but I have the number of places covered. Do tell. Nico did so. Jiraiya's eyes grew big and his jaw went once more to the floor. Even with a single clone in each of those places, Naruto had a network that rivaled his. And worse, it couldn't be that old. He grabbed a sheet of paper from the table and withdrew a pen. Start explaining. It's gonna be long. I don't care. He'd planned a visit to his favorite brothel, but that no longer mattered. He needed to get to the bottom of this, or it would eat him inside. Go. Well, it started with Mizuki, Naruto said. Have you heard about him? I have. He even had a day scheduled with the trader. There was information there, and a lesson to be taught. You do not mess with Jiraiya's godson. Well, I took him down, as you've probably heard. The thing was, his giant shuriken had been poisoned, and... As the story continued on, Jiraiya started smiling. He'd known he would have to pass his contacts to another, and feared Naruto wouldn't be the right kind of person to take care of his network. What a fool he'd been. With Naruto at the helm and a few months of training, Konoha was going to be feared on the intelligence level like they'd never been. His home was secure for a couple more generations, he could tell. Prank Day 128. The waves had changed in the past months. The festivities had tapered off, and the population had thrown itself into work. The bridge had quickly been finished, the population helping free of charge. The people had then turned to the fields, preparing them as much as possible for the next spring. The winter would be tough, and the next harvest probably wouldn't be as good as those previous, but a few years like this and waves would be booming. Jaga, formerly known as Niqni, watched as the people went, smiling all the while. Over the last month, most of Gato's former mercenaries left the island, a large part of them as soon as the bridge was completed. Without Gato's leadership, the combatants hadn't tried anything. There had been a few issues at first between the mercenaries and the Torisin, but they'd stopped after the first execution. Jaga had been the one to do it. He'd disliked the act, but agreed it was necessary. The criminal had been warned numerous times, and he'd still been caught in the act of raping someone. He'd been judged with the Torreson in attendance, and even other mercenaries had testified against him, bringing proof of previous crimes of a similar nature. He'd sworn during the entire trial that he'd kill them for what they'd done, and everyone agreed that exile wasn't enough, and that prison wasn't punishment enough. As such, death had been the penalty. At least, Jaga thought, he'd made it as painless as possible. The fact that the law now had teeth dissuaded anyone else from trying anything. The bloodiest mercenaries moved out quickly, and the others slowly left. That is, those that did not find new jobs. Some, who'd been more respected than most, were offered places in Wave. There were numerous empty houses, and there had been a few relationships started between mercenaries and townspeople. But many came to the Torreson for recruitment. The clone who'd gotten the idea for the group hadn't planned on attracting recruits, but it still happened. There were mercenaries who were looking for a good group to work with, and others that had simply left their home wanting to learn to fight, drunk on romantic stories of samurai. There were even Ronins abandoned by their families or left with only mercenary work, who were grateful for a place in a real troop. And most of those, the Naruto clones did not have the heart to send away. As such, the Torreson had nearly doubled in size. And it was looking like this wasn't done. Jaga turned around, continuing his patrol, when a message came for him via update. That was rare, since the pretend samurai limited their use of ninja techniques for their cover. He was being recalled instantly, and another clone would take his place. Jaga didn't delay, going directly toward the mansion that the Torreson had been offered. It had been the former house of a wealthy merchant of Wave, who had been eliminated by Gato as competition. The group hadn't refused the offer only because it was one of the rare places that the entire group could use. He went straight for the meeting room, which was where he had been called to. He was the last, with the rest of the informal heads of the group already there. Tora, the clone who had created the Torreson, was in his usual seat at the head of the table, with Rayon and Hyo at his left and Kuga at his right. He took the other seat the right, passing by the man who was coming with a request. The Konoha fashion group had started the clones by noticing details about people and what they wore. This one had quite a bit of contradictory information. The man was wearing clothes soaked in sweat, grass and dirt, but there were clues that he wasn't a peasant. There were remains of embroidery over the hem of his clothes, and the colors were still unnaturally vivid for peasants, even with the grime. "We are all here," Tora said in his grave voice. The clones had found that mercenaries responded better to such a sound. "What is your request?" "I am Getsuko, and I have come a long way to speak with honorable samurai such as yourselves. My lord's land, in San no Kuni, has been plagued by 2 rival Yakuza families who have the region in a stranglehold." Tears started to flow from his eyes. "Worse, they have been steadily assassinating those in power, either opposing them or working for their rivals. My masters, the Jin family, have slowly been eliminated one by one, and now only the last heir is left." He bowed low, so low that one could get the impression that he was pushing into the floor. "Please, noble warriors, answer this desperate request of a lowly man. Please save the last member of my lord's family, and rescue our lands from oppression. I will pay any price needed, if only the security of my lord's family can be assured." Silence rang in the room as his plea ended. He didn't move from his place on the floor, and his tears could still be heard falling to the ground. The 5 looked at each other, all lost. What should they do? Thanks for watching. I hope you had as much fun as I did putting this epic what if together. Make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a single twist in the story. Drop your thoughts, theories, or even wild ideas in the comments. I read every single one. And hey, if you're craving more awesome Naruto content, go check out the other videos on the channel. I've got plenty of heat waiting for you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember, even a shadow clone needs love. Peace out.